Maverick News, the antivirus program for your mind. And now, the Freedom Reporters.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker. Welcome back to the Maverick News channel. Wow, what a day. Hard to know where to begin. Do we start with probably the Tucker Carlson stuff? The Justice Minister in Canada resigning, more talk about the Edmonton shooter and his online rant before heading off to Edmonton City Hall to shoot things up. I don't know. All kinds of stuff. And Trudeau speaking today to his caucus. A lot of fallout still coming from the Tucker Carlson escapade. Tucker triggered Trudeau and his Libs. Wow, did he ever? Not happy. And we're going to give you guys a chance to weigh in on the conversation tonight as well. And I think we will be joined by a couple of our regular contributors tonight as well. So yeah, lots going on. And hopefully tonight as well, Dana Lee Melfi, the Peace Man, will join us on the program. I've been trying to reach him through the day. I sent him the link. He's supposed to come on tonight. I hope that he shows up. It's an open invitation, so we'll see if it happens this evening. He'll update us on what happened with his court case. Another big win for freedom, and especially a big win for him. They threw out his charges. We'll find out why if he clicks on the link. And we'll give you the opportunity to click on that link soon as well. So stay with me. We're going to get rocking and rolling right after this.
Fighting the Great Reset by leading the Great Resistance. Maverick News, the antivirus programs for your mind.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News, the antivirus program for your mind.
Okay, let's start with reaction to the Tucker Carlson visit to Canada first. I mean, the whole thing. Quite an event, and man, did they pack them in or what? Well, here, let's take a look at the size of the crowd that turned out to see Tucker Carlson. Who else was there? Conrad Black, Jordan Peterson. Was there somebody else? I wasn't there, see, because I'm not from that part of the country. I'm way out here in Ontario, and I wasn't going to pay for a plane ticket, and the tickets were selling from anywhere from $150 that I saw anyway, to as much at one time they were trying to get $800 for a front row ticket. 800 smackers. Then that price was cut to $300. At least that's how much they were asking at one of the websites that was selling tickets. But a lot of people stepped up and bought a ticket, as you're about to see here. I had the crowd queued up. Where'd it go? Massive crowd. I have so many things queued. Well, let's start with the reaction then. Up on Parliament Hill, we had 4 of Trudeau's ministers pretty upset. The Libs are severely triggered. So just on Parliament Hill, they were scrummed by reporters, 4 of these members of Parliament, Liberals, and they are asking Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre to condemn what Tucker Carlson had to say. Here's the scrum.
So I'm here with my colleagues, Liberal caucus members, ministers all, to talk about what happened last night in Edmonton when the Premier of the province of Alberta, Danielle Smith, invites Tucker Carlson right into the heart of my riding. You can tell a lot about a person by the company they keep. And I have knocked those doors in Edmonton Centre. And I know how progressive a riding Edmonton Centre is. I've represented it since 2015. And for Danielle Smith to bring the mouthpiece of the MAGA conservative far right to Edmonton Centre to spew hate about LGBTQ2 people is beyond the pale. It's deplorable, and we won't stand for it. And I can tell you, it is completely unacceptable for the Premier of any province to say that she wants to put a target on the back of any Canadian politician and my friend and colleague Stephen Guilbeault simply for doing his job. You can have respectful discourse in this country. You can raise the issue. You can bang your fist on a table at a FedProv meeting. That's all legit. But you do not summon the dogs of MAGA conservatism to come and somehow try to scare us and to try to incite violence against politicians of any stripe. It's not acceptable. And if she would take her job seriously, she'd actually be focused on housing, on climate change, on actually solving the issues of Albertans, like forgetting her ridiculous proposal on CPP, instead of trying to summon evil forces from the United States to try to take on one of our colleagues.
Evil forces.
Il y a une continuité qu'on voit ici des propos de Pierre Poilievre
It's summon
lorsqu'il est venu insulter
evil
les
forces.
élus québécois. On se demande plus si la politique d'extrême droite américaine va venir chez nous. Elle est chez nous. Elle est actuellement chez nous. On entend
You see, wow, the perspective on things is so polarized. Here's the Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault.
I mean, this goes beyond me and the fact that I was targeted last night at this event. This increases political violence against everyone who runs for office in this country, whether they're doing it at the municipal level, at the provincial level, or at the federal level. As my friend and colleague Randy said, like, we can have differences of opinion. We can bang our fist on the table when we meet. We can have strong disagreement, but to incite violence against people who disagree with you, that's not how things should be done in Canada.
Can you clarify what is the violence? What is the violence that I think the minister also said this in French? What is the violence that they're bringing to Canada? What is the political violence that you're talking about? Just to be very clear.
Well, to put a target on someone's back, for example. To
name, what is the evil,
to put someone in
crosshairs
crosshairs.
They're bringing here.
I mean, spewing hate speech about LGBTQ people, trying to bring the kind of division that they have in the United States north of the border. MAGA-style conservatism has no place in Canada, and it's trying to reach through our borders. And as Minister Rodriguez has said, conservative premiers, instead of doing their jobs, are trying to invite this wave of populism. And I can tell you, it's making newcomers nervous and fearful. People in the LGBTQ2 community do not feel safe. We have people who want to run for office that take a look at what happened last night in Edmonton and say, why bother? And that is not good for the political commons, and it's not good for Canadian democracy.
Mr. Rodriguez, you brought up Pierre Poilievre's name in your comments. I mean, is this going to be your strategy effectively going forward? Is tying Pierre Poilievre to Trump?
He wants to be prime minister of this country. what happened last night is not acceptable. Is he gonna condemn that? If he wants to run for prime minister, he should have the courage to condemn those. It's not acceptable in our
That's
country.
going to be your strategy. People attended, sir. I mean, what do you make of the fact that there is an audience for it and for their perspective?
Well, as I said in French, the extreme right politics, don't ask the question if it's coming to Canada. It's already here. And they're bringing it.
Mais moi, j'ai juste une question parce que depuis 24 heures, vous n'arrêtez pas de nous dire faut qu'on arrête de parler de politique, puisqu'on parlait de McDonald's, il faut qu'on parle vraiment de nous, ce qu'on fait sur le terrain. En quoi est-ce que ce que vous nous annoncez en ce moment, c'est en lien avec ce que vous faites sur le terrain? Vous aussi, vous entrez dans le domaine de la politique.
Ben, on fait la politique pendant qu'on livre pour les Canadiens. C'est normal, c'est notre job de faire de la politique.
Quand ça vous avantage.
Mais lorsqu'il y a des propos comme ceux-là qui sont tenus, lorsqu'il y a du Québec bashing, lorsqu'on attaque les francophones, lorsqu'on attaque la société dans son ensemble, on ne peut pas rester silencieux. Et M. Poilievre ne peut pas rester silencieux. Il doit condamner.
Really, I mean, those are very intolerant words.
Parlez à l'Union des municipalités, par exemple, à la Fédération québécoise des municipalités.
In French or English, they're very intolerant words.
À trouver des gens qui sont prêts à se présenter en politique municipale à cause du climat de violence de plus en plus important. Et ce qu'a fait Daniel Smith hier en invitant Tucker Carlson, il ne faut pas se le cacher, là, un animateur de télé déchu parce qu'il a menti publiquement, à venir au Canada prêcher ce message de haine-là. Il est l'un des responsables de ce qui s'est passé au Capitole le 6 janvier.
The language is, their language is actually fairly extreme and authoritarian in nature, very intolerant, no place for it. That is to say that they think it has to be crushed, maybe even criminalized.
Should he not have been let into the country? You're all familiar with his rhetoric. He's been doing this for years. So what, should he have been stopped at the border?
I asked that.
His word should be condemned. We cannot accept that in Canada. This is not us, and this will never be. This will never be us.
Are you not contributing to the divide by coming out here and comparing Poilievre to this and making this about him? Are you not contributing to the divide by doing that? If your government has been accused,
we're not comparing Poilievre to him. I think what
you're not. Have you looked at your own advertising from
what Mr. Rodriguez just said is he said I'm asking Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the opposition, to condemn those hateful and violent statement by Tucker Carlson.
The end. If you say there is no place for people with those political views, and I would say that probably the majority of the people who watch this program, who are part of our family, I think you guys probably support what Tucker Carlson had to say. You're probably all Tucker Carlson fans. And I will show you the size of the crowd that came out to see him last night. Not to say, I'm always trying to keep an open mind about things and always questioning myself, reviewing, checking myself. Here's Sheila Gunn Reid from Rebel News right in the shot. Of course, she's from Western Canada, right? Alberta. So she was out there, and I think she's a big Tucker fan. And here's just to take a look at the size of the crowd. This could have been a hockey game. Yeah. Yeah. So I think the promoters did okay. I think they made some money. Of course, Tucker then pulled. I'm calling it a publicity stunt, but it's more than just a publicity stunt. His phone call to the Prime Minister's office. Yeah, that was smart. great marketing tactic, publicity stunt, but I think there's more to it than just that. When he said that he was coming to Canada to liberate Canadians, to liberate the country, and then that reporter in that scrum asking the members of parliament, those liberals, should he have been arrested at the border? Well, I called the Prime Minister's office the next day myself and asked that very question. I left a message for Justin. I said, hey, I'm sure you must have heard the news. Maybe you got the message from Tucker Carlson. He's coming to town. Well, he's coming to Canada. What are you going to do? He says he's coming to liberate the country. I don't know exactly what that means. Is that some sort of invasion? Are you planning to have him arrested, stopped at the border? Or are you just going to let this guy come into the country? Are you going to invoke the Emergencies Act again? And the day I called was the day that the Emergencies Act was declared, the way that he used it was declared unconstitutional. So what did Tucker Carlson say that was so terrible? Well, I can't play you the whole speech, but I do have a little bit of a clip lined up here. And of course, he came out swinging for Justin Trudeau. Let's pick up the speech right here.
I was asked, we had this wonderful dinner last night. It would be super important to point that out a lot, like relentlessly. Somebody told me last night that his base, I was asked, we had this wonderful dinner last night with two of the most famous people in Canada, probably the two most famous people, Lord Black and my friend, Dr. Jordan Peterson. And I asked, like, is there anyone in the country who supports this guy? He's so, I know him I've never met him. I only know him through television. I know his cousin, Gavin Newsom, pretty well, but I don't know him. Is there anyone who takes him seriously? And everyone in the room said, oh, yeah. Young people, particularly young women, take him very seriously. They love him. And I thought there's really only one way to combat that. And that's by pointing out what an absurd poser this guy is. He's like a ridiculous figure. Like, you should dislike and resist Justin Trudeau and his government to the maximum extent of your ability. But before you do that, you should just laugh at him until you can't breathe. Seriously. The guy's like, he's showing up for a costume party when no one else is. There's no costume party, and there's Justin Trudeau. Like, speaking as some sort of moral voice. Weird little cross-dresser. So anyway, that's my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice, once you've done that, which is very effective, and I know it's not the Canadian way because it's such a polite society that everyone feels morally bound to take everyone else's point of view very seriously and sort of nod gravely and pretend to consider their perspective. But there are some perspectives that aren't in fact perspectives, they're attacks on you. And that's the main thing that I want to say in the short time allotted today, is that you should recognize what is happening to you. This is not a political debate to which you've been invited to participate. This is a destruction of you and your culture and your beliefs and your children and your future as a country. And that's not overstatement. It's provable statistically. So just take 3 steps back. If you have a government that is giving fentanyl to your children, as they are in BC, I notice your premier has a no fentanyl to kids policy, God bless her. I know, and you're applauding. And I'm applauding, and I'm grateful. But how distorted is your world where you have to applaud the one politician's like, we're not going to give fentanyl to the kids today. Okay, but then take 2 steps further back from that and ask yourself, if someone's giving fentanyl to your children, what's kind of the message of that? Well, they're trying to kill your children, obviously. Fentanyl? It's the #1 cause of death under 40 in the United States. #1 in the whole country, followed by suicide. If you want to know where we are, we're about 2 years behind you. And it's only because we have a louder media space than you do that we aren't ahead of you. But if someone's giving fentanyl to your children without telling you, they're trying to kill your children, which are your inheritance, so the only meaningful thing you will ever produce on earth, okay, are your children. That's the first thing to know. Second, if they are trying to kill you, And by the way, I know I'm offending everyone, even this group, because no one in Canada wants to talk about anything. It's like an Episcopalian Christmas dinner. And I grew up in that world, so I know everyone's had like 3 too many, and then someone will blurt out, "You wrecked my childhood!" And then everyone will sit there in silence. It's so awesome. But Anglo-Canada, like Anglo everywhere, doesn't like to say anything out loud. But let me just do it anyway. If you're killing 50,000 of your citizens, if the government is doing that through the MAID program, and a lot of them are not actually terminally ill, they're just sad, and the government is encouraging them to submit to being killed by the government, and then won't release the recent statistics, like, what is that? What is that? Yeah, it's genocide. That's exactly what it is. It's killing large groups of people. And who are those people, by the way? We don't know, because your government hasn't released the stats. What percentage of those were born in Canada? I'd bet right around 100%. So if you're a government, you have the duty to your citizens, people who are from here, people whose ancestors built the place, not exclusively to them, but primarily to them, to your citizens. Like, why else do you exist except to serve your citizens? And if you're targeting your citizens, how many people who arrived in Canada in the last 10 years have opted into the MAID program? I don't know the answer. I'd bet around 0. It's all people who are from here. And now the government brags, oh, we're saving money because they died. That's the darkest thing I can imagine. I bet there's 0 conversation about that in this country, because I know this country and I know what it's like. It's too horrible. No one wants to talk about it. You should talk about it. But more than anything, you should internalize the message of that, which is they hate me. They hate me to the point they're willing to kill me, which they are. And the third thing is, notice the erosion of your most basic civil liberties, not the ones granted to you by the crown, but the ones granted to you by God. And those would include the freedom of speech, which is inalienable. It cannot be taken from you, no matter who is in Ottawa, or as we say, Ottawa, which, by the way, is the correct pronunciation according to my friends in the Ojibwa community. I've pronounced it that way every time on television. I get all these angry, you're pronouncing it incorrectly. You don't even know the name. It's like, yeah, I know a lot about Canada. I'm doing it on purpose to make fun of you so you will laugh, but you won't. And then this Ojibwa leader writes in and he goes, yeah, all the whites are wrong. It's actually Ottawa. Go Ottawa! Anyway, it doesn't matter who's in the prime minister's office. Your rights remain the same because you were born with them, because you are not a slave, you're a human being, and you have inherent dignity because God made you. That's just a fact. And if they're taking those rights away piecemeal and doing so in the name of public safety, even as they make the public sphere much more dangerous, which they have, in case you haven't noticed, Canada has a lot more violent crime now than it did 20 years ago. Have you noticed? Of course you have. You live here. And if they're telling you you can't defend yourself against that crime, we're going to disarm you. You can't protect your life or your family. And you're like, oh, yeah, it's for the public safety. It's just not a big deal. These are weapons of war. No, they're weapons of self-defense, which you need and deserve as a free person, not a slave. And then they're telling you you can't complain about it. And then they're subsidizing the media to the point where all of your big media outlets, which are disgusting, are state media because they're taking state cash. Do you watch CBC? I do occasionally. I can turn in any hour of the day and I will learn that I am racist for driving an SUV and not being trans. That's the whole schedule of CBC programming. But interpret that. That's not woke. Oh, it's woke. I hate the woke crap. It doesn't mean anything. They hate you. That's what they're saying. They're saying that you are bad. That's exactly what they're saying. Don't lie to yourselves. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. We're going to come back to that. Let's. Can you hear me?
Are you there? Hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's a little bit loud there, but when you're speaking, the audio comes through, so we're good to go.
Okay, I'll speak loud because I'm on the shop floor.
Yeah.
This is pure gold. Okay, the Liberals are very scared today, and they should be. I'm surprised Tucker never came through with all the scandals so far by the Liberal government. I'm surprised that they're still in power, Rick. Really, I am. Really, I am.
Yeah.
We can start off with Alvogate. Okay, that's where it all began. Alvogate. There's just so many So many scandals, it's hard to keep up to, right? The cash for access scandal, the Abby Khan scandal, the cultural appropriation scandal, the S&C Lavalin scandal, blackface scandal, the We Charity scandal. It goes on and on, right? The RCMP investigation scandal in Nova Scotia. Crazy. The $6,000 a night scandal for the motel rooms. The ArriveCan scandal. The alleged Chinese interference scandal. It goes on and on. Oh, we got the Nazi in Parliament scandal. And now we have what scandal? He broke the Charter of Rights with the convoy. And people are going to pay.
So these Liberal MPs came out. They were scrummed. They say that Poilievre should condemn what Tucker Carlson had to say. Very triggered. To me, what those politicians were saying was very intolerant. They're really saying that they would like to crush their political opponents. They're saying there's no place for that kind of talk in this country, that kind of discourse, and I disagree completely. They're saying there's no room for conservative voices. Now, I mean, you can interpret what Tucker Carlson said in a number of ways, and I don't agree with everything that he says, but I think that you're right. Largely what he's saying resonates with a huge portion of the population, maybe even today, a majority. I would not be surprised at all if the majority of Canadians, even new Canadians, agree with a lot of what he had to say. So what do you think of the reaction from those Liberal members of Parliament today?
As a Canadian, and you as a Canadian or any Canadian, period, we have a right to go any way we want when it comes to voting. If we want to become MAGA, we could become MAGA, okay? These guys they're clowns, okay, and they're trying to suppress. It's just another way of them trying to suppress us, okay? By calling Tucker Carlson a racist and, well, it sounds familiar. Everything that they're calling him, white supremacist, a misogynist, everything else, kind of reminisces the same tone as the convoy movement.
Mm-hmm. My view on this, Leo, is that these members of Parliament, these Liberals, Justin Trudeau himself, they really have to accept some responsibility for the rise of the people on the right side of the political spectrum, because it's a reaction to their extremism. In reality, they're the ones who beat protesters in Ottawa. They're the ones who are throwing their political opponents in jail. They're the ones who are passing legislation to invoke censorship and suppress the voices of their political opponents. And the harder you squeeze, the more you do those kinds of things, those actions get an equal and opposite reaction, sometimes maybe even a greater reaction back the other way. So if they're not happy with Tucker Carlson coming to Canada and standing up at a podium saying things that really, I would say, reflect what the views are of the people in the audience, then they really need to look in the mirror to see what it was that sparked that kind of reaction to begin with. It was their authoritarianism.
They created this mess, okay, 100%, and they're not taking any responsibility for it at all. And for them to sit there and chastise Danielle Smith, she should be taking care of the homelessness. It's not. No, that was a federal issue. Homelessness, the drug addiction, everything else. They fell short, and now they're trying to put the blame on Danielle Smith. Okay, and anybody that moves to that, they want to call it right. I don't call it far right. I call it just right, period. Okay, and I stand up. You know what? I think Danielle Smith should be running the goddamn country. That's me.
Yeah, I like her a lot, and she, as she said, she doesn't pre-screen people that she meets, and just because she met him on stage or whatever doesn't mean she agrees with everything that he says. But I don't think Tucker. I've not watched the entire speech from Tucker Carlson last night, or yesterday, but I haven't heard anything yet that sounds like it was across a line or approached any kind of extremism. Did you hear anything along those lines?
No, there was no violence incited. Okay, he didn't say anything along those lines. Violence incited. Kill this guy, kill that guy. There was none of that shit. Okay, so the Liberals are they're in hot water and they don't know how to get out. They're like a frog in hot water. Okay, and they can't jump out of this one. Okay, they can't. With all the scandals that have compounded on the Liberals, I'm surprised they're still around. They're creating the issue that's going to happen. If they don't step down and do the right thing, okay, and the NDP don't hold their feet to the fire and call for a goddamn vote of non-confidence and get us into an election, what do they expect? You fight fire with fire. And it's going to come to that. I don't want to see it come to that. But they're going to create it. And then they can try and self-justify it. See, we told you so. We told you so. Fuck that.
Well, when Tucker called the Prime Minister's office and said he was coming to Canada to liberate Canada, on the surface, that sounds like a joke. And I did laugh, and I think it is funny. And at this point, you can't take that too seriously. That being said, I think there is an element of seriousness to it, because you're hearing it not just from him, but also from Lieutenant Steve Rogers, Jackson Hinkle, and I've heard it from others. So I think there is some strange seriousness about it that makes me uneasy. I don't like that kind of rhetoric. I think that there is a degree of as I say, seriousness to it. So I called the Prime Minister's office the next day and said, what are you going to do about it? Left him a message. That reporter just asked the same question of those members of parliament. Should he have been arrested at the border if you don't like what he has to say? Now, it hasn't risen to that level yet. But when I say there's a level of seriousness to it, I have noticed that some people seem to actually want the United States to invade the country. I mean, and again, I have to point at Justin Trudeau for creating that environment where people are so fed up that they would rather have the United States invade the country and take us over than live under our current system of government. It kind of blows my mind, but I actually had some people phone me and say, you know what, I heard Tucker say that he's coming to liberate us, and I think we're ready for it. I think we're ready for the United States to come up here and hold the government accountable, and all of that rhetoric. And I'm like, I get it, but I don't want the United States to invade us. And then on the flip side of that, Leo, I'm seeing also some pushback from people within the freedom movement, or whatever is left of it, criticizing Tucker Carlson and pointing out some kind of weird things that have been going on, specifically about a guy that was a trucker that he interviewed in his latest episode on X, and people are saying the guy isn't actually a trucker, that he's some sort of a plant. I'll show people that afterward, but can I get you to comment on that? Any thoughts on all of that? Let's come up. We're going to come up to Canada and take over, like liberate the country. In fact, he said it again in the latest episode of his show on X.
My comment to that is, I'm conflicted on it. Okay, and I'm conflicted for this reason. I only live 1 mile from downtown Detroit. Okay, so I've been Americanized my whole life. The border really don't start past you. You know what I'm talking about, Rick? Okay, yeah. That's London, Ontario, and you're in between. Okay, so you're part of what would take place. Okay, and a lot of people have been saying it for years down here, and I hear it. Have the referendum, get Southwestern Ontario into Michigan. It's where we belong. Okay, I've lost my Canadian identity a long time ago, way before the Liberals took power. We're talking the day that they came out with the melting pot and everything else. This land is your land, this land is our land, from the Arctic Circle to Vancouver Island or wherever, right?
Mm.
Okay, we lost our identity a long time ago. Now, we're paying what we're paying, and it's ridiculous. Ridiculous. The food prices, the housing prices, everything else, the gas prices. There's no reason for it. You know, when I heard Trudeau today, you haven't been there yet in the show. I don't know if you're going to show him at the caucus meeting that he had. Okay, and what he was talking about today that I really found very funny was him saying that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are not about the environment and this and that. He started talking about his accomplishments with the EV companies, okay, and Dow fucking Chemical. They're not very clean people, Dow Chemical. Okay, his plastic bags scandal, okay, right here. They make great lunch bags, but folks, these are still made out of polyurethane, which is plastic. They're winding up in our dumps as we speak right now. I have over probably 25, 30 of these bags at my house to go grocery shopping with. Now, if one gets meat in it, I can't use that bag again. I got to throw it in the garbage. Where's it going to go? It's going to go to the dump. There's thousands and thousands of these bags already in the dump where it takes a lot longer to break down than the normal plastic bags that we had, right? So everything that this Liberal government's doing, then, is wrong. Okay? They have to, it don't matter if they acknowledge it and stand up and say, oh, even an apology at this point in the game is no good. That apology should have came a couple years ago for the convoy people. Okay? We made a mistake. Not let the courts rule it, and then you sit there and mainstream media will sit there and word it differently. You broke the law. Now, if anybody should be held for treason in this country, high treason, is, now that I just seen it, is Justin Trudeau. You broke the law. You shared information with the Five Eyes, okay, on the convoy truckers, normal people, bank accounts, everything else. The Five Eyes. Well, sorry to tell you, Five Eyes, you're not going to see what's coming around the corner this time around. And if Trudeau don't step down very soon, it's going to get bloody. I smell it, I can taste it, and I hear it on the street.
Well, I hope it doesn't come to that, obviously, and we've had many conversations about that, but I do see the frustration as well, so I know exactly what you are talking about, sir. And it's very concerning. And that's why I think there is actually a level of seriousness to this talk of we're coming to Canada to liberate you, or the SOS campaign from Lieutenant Steve Rogers. So I'm concerned about the preservation of Canadian sovereignty. And, you know, in that vein, we are almost revisiting issues that were explored even during incidents like the War of 1812.
It is. I'm concerned about where my next fucking meal's coming from. Okay? Yeah. Tom Marazzo said it right last night on Shadow Davis. Okay, he was on the show last night. The 9 meals effect. And that goes by, go without 9 meals in a row and see what happens. And he said, my own grandma, if she went without 9 meals in a row, she'd be kicking down the neighbor's door with a shotgun looking for food. So a lot of people better get their shit in gear because, like I said, I'm worried about where my next meal is going to come from. And I make over $100,000 a year. Now, the poor folks out there at 50, 60, or even less, 70, or even less than that, shit's going to hit the fan soon, Rick. I can smell it. I can smell it like that. I like eating. I try and come on your show and eat something. I just had a Twinkie. That's what I think about the Liberals.
You think we're actually that close to a reaction that severe?
Go 9 meals. Go 9 meals in a row without eating, and see what happens. You're going to get a reaction. The food banks are already depleted. The refugees are bringing in, they've already got their hands in that, okay? It's gone. The mission's not as nice as the mission was with all the food donations. Now, there's still people out there helping. But man, like I said, can America come over here and take Southwestern Ontario? I'd sign it. I'd sign a referendum in a heartbeat, in a New York second.
So let's say the U.S., say Tucker decides to lead an invasion. Okay, I'm laughing, but I shouldn't be. Or, so he gets Jackson Hinkle on his left and he gets Lieutenant Steve Rogers on his right, which is reflective of the politics. And then he's maybe in the middle. And they come up here with, a pellet gun and a hockey, and they're wearing their hockey helmets. And they stage their invasion of Canada. And no problem because we don't have a military left. Would you be in favor of joining the U.S. or splitting the country up somehow? I mean, I'm hearing talk even from, one of the reasons that event was held out in Alberta is because there's a strong and growing independence movement, a separatist movement out there that is, I would say, conservative in nature, in ideology, that people here in the East are maybe not entirely aware of. But it's growing out there. And I think that's partly what that event last night was about. It's because you've got that political movement happening that supports an event like Tucker Carlson's. So what do you think? Would you be in favor of something like that? Would we be better off?
Yes. And my reason why, and my big reason why, is the Quebecois, that party, the Quebecois party, okay? They're only in Quebec, but they're calling the shots for the rest of the country. They shouldn't even be a political party. Okay? Quebec is their own little world. It's cheaper to live in Quebec. It's cheaper to buy food. It's cheaper to buy booze in Quebec because of their representation by who? The Quebecois party. And they always use that thing called, we're going to separate if we don't get what we want.
Yes.
So, as for Alberta should have left a long time ago. Okay, and I'm in favor of that. And I'm in favor, like I said, Toronto will never leave. They're all liberals. But Southwestern Ontario, move the border. I'm paying 66% in tax. Not just me, you are. Everybody watching this show right now that pays taxes. Okay, in some way, some form, 66%. So every dollar that I put up, okay, I'm only seeing 36 cents of my dollar that comes back into my pocket, and that's wrong.
Yeah. When I look south of the border, though, or north of the border in your case, because Detroit is actually north of Windsor, but when I look across the border to the United States, I see a whole lot of problems down there too, and a lot of them are the same kinds of problems we have up here. So what do you think would actually be better if we split the country up and had portions of it join the United States?
It's affordability. That's the politics. It don't matter where you go in the world, your politics are going to be politics. Okay? It's the affordability. Should we be getting gouged the way that we are for the services that we get? Our health care is a joke. Okay, yeah, it's free, but you'll be waiting 48 hours to see that free doctor when you really need them. Okay, it's a joke. Canada's crumbled to where the point, like I said, I lost my Canadian identity. I hear the world, okay, and places like Britain and Sweden and everywhere else, now they want to get a draft going for people. Listen, that ain't ever going to happen. It ain't ever going to happen. They want this war machine going. Joe Biden's done. Okay, he's done. The best place for Southwestern Ontario would be Michigan. They knew it all along, too. All we have is the waterway that divides us, in a bridge, in a tunnel, maybe two bridges someday, right? But I'm for it. As for Alberta leaving, they should have left a long time ago. They have the natural resources. Use them. There's no reason why somebody in Iraq or Saudi Arabia don't even pay for gas. It's 3 cents a liter for gas. Well, we have one of the biggest oil reserves in the world in Alberta, and they're paying how much? $1.30 a liter?
Yeah.
You know, the government likes to put a stranglehold on our resources. What's next? Well, we know what's next. Water. We hold, the third largest water reserve in the world, fresh water?
Second or third, I guess, yeah.
Right. It's huge. It's massive. Okay? And water is going to be the ultimate gold. You can't drink your gold. You got to drink water to survive. Right? So water is going to be a hot commodity, and we're going to let the next Canadian government or somewhere down the line rape and pillage the village, okay, and sell our resources the way that they are to countries like China, the Middle East, whoever. No, those are our resources, not the Canadian government's. The Canadian government comes in, they're looking out for our best interests. They're not. They never have. If they did, we wouldn't have a debt.
Yeah, well, they certainly. I hear exactly what you're saying about the resources, and I agree that Alberta has been getting a bad deal. They should be awash in money. You know, everybody in Alberta should be living in prosperity. There's no reason they shouldn't be, and yet the oil remains in the ground, and they can't get it to market. And they have all kinds of problems with their healthcare system. I think it was 60% of the doctors surveyed out there are thinking of quitting and leaving the healthcare system, maybe even moving out of the province because their practices are not financially viable. So
Right.
we've got serious problems. No question about that.
Well, I work with a guy tonight, and it's funny because I apprenticed with him back in 1989. Okay, for what we do today, right? But he's working with me now. But he came back from Fort McMurray. He was working up there in the oil sands area, right? And he was telling me last night, which I thought was weird, that if you're a native and you're in Fort McMurray in the oil sands, just being a native from that res, they're paid stipends every quarterly, $25,000 a pop. So the average native gets $100,000 free for doing nothing. All Albertans should be getting that.
Well, certainly the wealth is being left in the ground out there. And I have said for a long time that these environmentalists, the environmental groups, are being funded by foreign interests, not to protect the environment, but simply to exert political pressure in ways that force us to leave our resources untouched so that we then become dependent on Middle Eastern oil. And that makes us a slave to them. So that's the way I view it.
You know what? I view it the same. You know, when we have politicians out there that are blatantly caught red-handed for conflict of interest and they're still in power, Houston, we have a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay? It's criminal. Criminal. You know, look at, I like how you flick that 3 times. It is, okay? Open your eyes, folks. That's the good thing about Maverick Multimedia, because my eyes are wide open every day. I'm like a little baby when I got on the show, like a newborn baby. I was like this. And then slowly my eyes started opening and going, you know, a lot of these people are right that are on your show, a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they call it conspiracy theorists, this and that. Like a lot of people today, even I watched Rebel News before your show, and they were talking about the dude that went into the city hall there in Edmonton, right? A lot of folks, okay, because mainstream media is not, the Edmonton police didn't release the name, and it's funny because last night I commented before any names were released, I said his name was probably Mohammed Abdullah Zak, whatever, right, in a comment, and sure as shit today when I watched Rebel News, guess what? He's one of those guys, okay, from Gaza. Gaza, right, sympathizer, and your mainstream media is still not putting it out there. And there's a video of the guy doing a video before he went in there with all his garbage, Molotov cocktails and his guns and his Gaza snakehead shit they put on their heads, okay? Mainstream media is not telling you. We're under attack. Okay,
yeah, I have.
Windsor,
I have.
even Windsor, Rick, sorry to cut you off. Windsor City Hall. Did you hear what happened there?
No, I don't think so. What are you talking about?
Because mainstream media won't tell you. There was an incident there, too, where somebody vandalized the transformer, and they got him on video, and he's a Mohammed whatever, right? So that's 2 city halls, one in Edmonton and one in Windsor, Ontario. Okay, we're under attack, period. And mainstream media don't want to tell you that because guess what? You could just get shot or get stabbed or whatever, right? And they'll write it off the way that they want. We're at war.
Yeah, here I'll show you that video from Edmonton. I also have a picture of the guy close up here. So there's the guy in Edmonton City Hall. Security cam. I guess that's. I don't know. I guess it's not security camera footage, but some sort of footage that somebody shot. The camera's moving, so somebody must have shot it with a cell phone or something. And I've got this guy's picture as well.
Mainstream media is trying to write it off as he was a disgruntled worker and all kinds of shit, right? But then you see the video that he posted from his vehicle. Here it is. Watch this shit.
Yeah, here I'll actually run the video then. Here, that's just a still shot. But hang on a second here. I have a copy of his video. I want to run the full thing. Here we go. Okay. I also have the media release from police that I obtained. So here we go.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Before I do my mission, I want you all to know that I am not a psychopath. I do not believe in bloodshed. I am not one of these monsters that hurt children, that hurt innocents, and that promote wars or the civilization of our society. I'm just tired of seeing the tyranny and corruption taking over our society and our lives. Good, honest, and God-fearing men and women must be our doctors, law enforcement, diplomats, politicians, and teachers that rise up against this wokeism disease that's leading our generation into deception. We need good men and women in all workforces to promote a pro-human life. We need to rise up against this inflation, housing crisis, the unrest that's happening between us because of multiculturalism, due to religion, race, and all that stuff. This needs to come to an end with one another. Or anything or anyone that leads us into destruction, we must rise and put a stop into leaders, officials, and anybody that has hands into this corruption, into this genocide that's going on in Gaza and throughout the world. Anybody that is destabilizing other countries, hurting their community, should feel ashamed of themselves. And inshallah, we will rise against you guys and we'll put you on trial. It's a part of this agenda. We're not here for no reason. This is a man-made war. This is a man-made immigration crisis that we're all here. Anybody that is destabilizing other countries, hurting their community, should feel ashamed of themselves. And inshallah, we will rise against you guys and we'll put you on trial. As immigrants, we must understand that we are part of this agenda. We're not here for no reason. This is a man-made war. This is a man-made immigration crisis that we're all here. But instead of hate and anger in our hearts, we must spread love, respect one another, show honesty with one another, and promote pro-life and work with one another to build our economy, our country, and promote strong and pro-human life. We must respect the Canadians' laws, and we must stand with the owners of this land and Canadians shoulders to shoulder to fight racism to fight this inflation, to fight this rising of costs, to fight our tax money going into this genocide, that's going into all this wars, to weapons that's destroying all these countries. We must all stand united and fight this off and promote a healthy social life, healthy health system, healthy education. We gotta start taking control of our lives and taking control of how we spend our money. How what do you call them? I have a good life. I have a beautiful wife. I have beautiful children. I love them dearly, but I cannot sit back and let this happen. I cannot watch our society crumble into darkness. We all need to rise up. We all need to stop being on our phones. We gotta promote a healthy social life where we all communicate with one another, see each other. We gotta stop all this racism at work, outside. We gotta stop bullying. We gotta stop hate. We gotta be in control of our tax, how it's spent, and the tax money has to be spent on us, and it has to be spent on something that is pro-life, pro-human, and something that is beneficial for us and our children. همیشه بولی نکنین نفرا را، همیشه ضررتان نرسین، همیشه خوبی بکنین، مثل حرامی ها وری نشوین، خون نریزانین، جوانا را، اشتکا را، بیچارا را هیچ وقت ضرر نرسانین. همیشه دارای درست جنگ کنین، همیشه سربلند باشین، همیشه کوشش کنین که زندگی خوب داشته باشین. And that goes for all of us. We need to start filtering our water. We need to watch what we're eating. We got to start eating healthy. Our officials need to start promoting healthy choices, healthy diet, exercises. They need to unite us all as one, and we all got to start doing something positive for our society. Look what's happening. We all know what's going on, and we cannot turn a blind eye. I'm not turning a blind eye. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Inshallah, I'll succeed with my mission. If I don't succeed, I know somebody else will succeed for me. Assalamu alaikum.
I'm going to let you guys talk first. Hello. How are you, Gail?
Hi. I was actually talking it. I was going to previous topic, but I will say this, now that I've heard more of that content, that is, there's a little more there than what I've heard on social media. And the one thing I always say is we have to be careful about cherry picking and only picking out certain pieces out of, what someone's saying. So just like, whatever Tucker Carlson said, I've seen this happen across the board with, people pick something out. And what I've mainly seen on social media from this person was a little bit different than what I just heard. To be honest, I think this is someone who sounds more confused. And I have many, many more questions. And now that I've heard more of that, I think we definitely there needs to be an examination of everything that he said. But one of the things I did find interesting is that how little coverage this has got. I mean, for someone to go in to a municipal office with a gun, shooting up, and for it not to be a much bigger story, whatever the background is. And, this is something I feel strong about too. Like, we have to be careful we don't just come at him because of his name or his accent. I think that's the main question I have, is I want to hear all about this, but it sounds like someone very all over the place too. It sounds very, a lot of what he's saying seems like, and some of it contradicts things as well. So, because he's saying pro-life, and yet he goes in with a gun, and that doesn't seem to be very strong if you're wanting supporting life and supporting a better society. I don't know if going in with a gun into a municipal office, which must have terrified people that are not making some of these decisions, right? So that's the other thing. You're going after some people that I can't even imagine what that would be like to live through, right? Some of the people that worked in that office. And these are frontline people. These are working people that, and that's, so that's my thoughts on that now that I've heard more of the, what he was talking about.
All right, well, let's get Leo's thoughts, and we'll come back to the Tucker Carlson stuff, because I know you certainly want to comment on that. And what do you think, Leo?
If it was voting time, I would have voted for that guy. His great speech until he got to the part Gaza and everything else, right? This is our immigration. He wasn't born here. this is bad immigration. He's been here for a while because his English is pretty damn good. Okay. And this is what happens when you don't vet and screen and you just let anybody into our country. You're going to get this. There's a lot of Canadians that feel like that guy, don't get me wrong, on some of the shit that he was talking about politically speaking. Okay, the cost of living, everything else. There's a lot of Canadians, born Canadians, that feel that way. Right?
Do we know though where he was born? I just want to be, I don't think we know that. So like I'm always reluctant to jump into the how he got here. That's the only thing. I think I can speak to the issue at hand of more the issue of violence and how this is covered, right? So this seems, yeah.
You said it right, Gail. This should have been a huge story, massive story. Okay.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't. Like people even in Alberta, I put it up on my Facebook page. People were contacting me, going, "What are you talking about?" And even my own brother, I seen it on the news, and they scrubbed it on the news into a different. He's being charged with arson and something else, not terrorists, not terrorism. Okay.
Yep.
Right. So they're trying to downplay it because you know what? It's going to hurt the Liberals because why? They want to bring in another 500,000 immigrants into the country. Well, if this is your immigration plan, I don't want them. I believe in good immigration, fair immigration. Okay, you cross at a border, but the immigration that's going on now, it's anybody comes in, nobody's vetted. We don't know who's who.
This is the media release from Edmonton Police. Talks about the incident on January 23rd. Entered the building from the parkade. He had incendiary devices believed to be Molotov cocktails that caused one small fire outside an elevator. He fired several rounds from a long gun into the ceiling, walls, and windows. No one was struck by gunfire. He then dropped the firearm on the floor, as we saw, and surrendered to a City Hall security commissionaire who detained him until police arrived moments later. His name is Benzani Sarvar, 28 years of age, charged with 6 charges: reckless discharge of a firearm into place, use, place, throw, explosive substance, arson of property, possess incendiary material, use of firearm while committing offense, and careless use of firearm. Those don't sound nearly serious enough to me in terms of charges. EPS is aware of a video circulating that may be related to the incident. They're reviewing the video, and they're working closely with our national security partners on this investigation, which is a politically correct way of saying they're taking a look at this to see if it is an act of terrorism. And I'll throw it back over to you, Leo.
Well, where were the Five Eyes when we needed them? Okay, this guy obviously might be a lone wolf. Who knows? Looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It's a duck. The guy's a terrorist. Quack, quack. He's a terrorist. Okay, we've been called terrorists for less. Why ain't he being charged under the Terrorism Act?
Let me ask you guys a question. And Leo, I think you already answered this, but listen to what this guy said. What did he talk about? He's talking about doctors, wokeism. We have to rise up, he says, against wokeism. It's a pro-human agenda, which I hear people like Alex Jones say all the time now. He's on Team Humanity. So is this guy, apparently. He, I can't read my own handwriting here, but he talks about immigration. He talks about being an immigrant and being here for a reason, but at the same time says that we need to support the owners of this country, which would be the First Nations peoples, which we hear a lot of rhetoric about, even within the freedom movement, and from people like Justin Trudeau alike. Talks about tax money, the economy, inflation, the immigration crisis, which I guess he seems to feel affects him as well. But I'm not sure that he's looking at it from exactly the same perspective as we would. But immigration certainly on his agenda. I think when he's talking about pro-life, he's talking about things like abortion, talking about the education system. No doubt, given his political ideology and leanings, he's probably against drag queen story time and everything that would go with that. And then he goes into even things like filtering water and being careful about eating healthy food, which again is this exact same kind of stuff that I hear from people within the freedom movement who are worried that the food is killing us, that the chemtrails are poisoning us, that the water is killing us because it's got fluoride in it and other chemicals. And I mean, I go down this list and I don't see anything on here at all that contradicts or runs contrary to what, say, a typical freedom fighter or maybe even, conservatives might subscribe to. That being said, there's something that triggered this guy. And as I've been saying for quite a while, there is, in my view, a giant psyop going on, and people are being manipulated. They are being fed information in a particular way that affects them psychologically. And then at certain points, something happens to radicalize them, and they take radical actions like this guy did, or like, what was the guy's name? Adrian Espuro, the guy who went to the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. event and was heavily armed, and it looked like he might be there to try to assassinate the presidential contender. I'm seeing it over and over again. It's a pattern. It's a cycle, and I think we need to be very aware of it. It's concerning to me because what this guy says, I hear other people saying. And the other thing, and Leo, nothing against you, but even when I hear people say things about our public officials like they are criminals, that kind of talk reinforces a belief or an attitude that these politicians, these bureaucrats, must be held accountable. And if someone is radicalized to the point where they are ready to take action, they will take action, as we just saw this guy take action now. And I'm sorry to say it, but we've also seen, and we've had recordings released by even Veterans for Freedom. I've released information from people within, like an element within the freedom movement, but whatever they are, where they have also called out for exactly the kinds of actions that we just saw this guy take in Edmonton. So as far as I'm concerned, there is something really wacky going on out there, and it's involves the internet. It involves psychological manipulation, mass formation psychosis. It's all related to these massive protests that we are seeing. People are being manipulated. We need to be aware of it because it is resulting in some cases in people being radicalized to a point where they are being triggered to take actions like that guy just took. It's affecting their mental health. It's affecting the mental health of people. And this, in my view, is and I can't prove it, but it matches everything. It's a pattern, and it's very concerning to me because I see people who otherwise would be very stable and level-headed. And even when I listen to this guy, I can't disagree with a lot of what he is saying, but something has happened to him where he takes it to the next step, to which he crosses a line and it becomes completely unacceptable. And I'll throw it back out to you guys to get your thoughts.
Yeah, Rick, I just want to say this, and then I'm probably going to have to jump off shortly, but we have to be very careful that we sometimes, what we're saying, the other side, when we're looking at how people are charged, I think, to jump to say that, terrorism charge, I don't know if we have all the information. And this is, I come more from that, curiosity place where I always say, first, let's find out what's going on before we jump to what a person is. Because we see it all the time. Sometimes we get very upset when they jump to, it's a white supremacist, right? So it's that, and I get it that does happen, but two wrongs don't make a right as well. So I think that we have to be really careful in this case. And I think there is something, I've done work in the past where I've, like, more from a marketing perspective, granted, but in the area of mental health. And I think that we have to really look at what people are dealing with. And that's what I said. A lot of his comments seem to be a bit all over the place to a certain degree, but I wouldn't say they were all either from the right or the left. I think you're right. Something, and people right now do get triggered very easily. That's a term, triggered, and and then we often use that term too often. I think I've seen this happen where it's almost like, before we get into this talk, you may get triggered, and it's almost like people go, "Oh, I'm going to be triggered." Like you're almost kind of suggesting to them, right? And I think that's causing a lot of problems as well, is that people now are almost, we're feeding that to them in terms of, and people say, the term anxiety gets used when it's not really anxiety. I mean, if you have anxiety about a test, no, that's normal. Like that's something that, if you're stressed about something, there's certain things that are normal that we've now made almost an extreme, right? That if you have to do something difficult, it becomes, that's the problem, as opposed to what is, what used to be, and I don't know, normal, right? I mean, it's a term. What the heck does that mean? But I think in terms of this case, I think we need to get more information. But Rick, definitely. I think you're bringing up some points in terms that we need to examine. Unfortunately, I don't think we're in that place to be able to step back and really look at this. Instead, we'll get into attack mode, right? It's going to be, and that's where social media does fan the flames sometimes. And I work in that area. So I see that there's extremism on each side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something's happened in his head, right? Something's taken all these things that he believes, but then something has turned on a switch or something to make him act out in this way. And I don't know what it is exactly that happens to people when that happens, but there's a pattern there. And when I go back and I look at some of the recent incidents involving shooters, the guy at the Colorado amusement park who went in heavily armed, ended up committing suicide, writing on the wall again, "I am not a killer." Like, this is a pattern, and exactly the same kinds of language that they use when they post these videos. Again, even here, he's like, he's pro-life and he wants to, it's all very positive stuff. And then it's like the guy in Colorado, he was conflicted in some way in his mind to the point where he killed himself and writes on the wall, "I'm not a killer." But he went there heavily armed, apparently to kill people. It's something really messed up. And I wish I had more answers for people, but this is very concerning to me. This goes beyond normality, that's for sure.
Well, and we've talked about this, Rick, and I've always said this, any extreme view on any side is never healthy. I mean, and this is my Pollyanna side of me, that I believe we need more balance. There's a reason they say, when I'm at the gym, I work on balance, right? You're supposed to work on balance so that you're not, if you're really strong on right side and weak on the left, that's not good for you, right? And we've sort of lost an ability to step back and, examine things without jumping into attack mode. And that's what I see all the time. People want to attack first before they actually do the research and listen. And until we go listen, you brought up a good point about the Tucker Carlson, and I have it on my list. I've listened to most of it, but I want to listen to the whole talk. We don't do that. We take out a piece of it, and then everybody jumps on and says, and I know when they're saying about the LGBTQ with Tucker Carlson, I believe I understand what he said. And in the context, I mean, that's the other thing, is some of this is when you're a public speaker and or comedians, I mean, they use humor, and we now have almost lost any sense of humor about any topic. And that's what baffles me. Like, people are complaining about comedians that are saying things. I'm like, well, why did you go see? Turn them off if you don't like whoever, right? I always find that interesting when people are, go to a comedy show and then get mad when the person says something that offends them. It's like, well, did you not know that you were going to see who you were going to see?
Do you think those members of parliament, the Liberals, do you think they have, do you see anything from their perspective at all? Like, is there any legitimacy to their concerns?
Well, I was listening to the clips you played, and I want to stress that I only based on the clips you shared, right? And I was actually going to write something like, is this satire? Because I actually thought, like, number one, is it satire? But number two is, I often find it interesting when they're putting all this energy into this and they're giving a greater platform for Tucker Carlson, for Pierre Poilievre, like you're giving more people will go out and maybe listen to it. And for me, this comes back to when you look at that crowd of people, I saw it with Jordan Peterson. I saw it with Tucker Carlson, and I've seen it. Who was the other one? Oh, if you look at Joe Rogan, right? So what I look at it from, whether you like or dislike what they're saying, you have to look at the crowds of people that are coming out. So instead of saying all of those people are dumb, stupid, racist, misogynist, instead, why not say, hey, what is it about these people that you like? Like, can we learn about why people are en masse going to see these people? I was just talking to someone tonight about this, with Trump doing so well. And it's like, no one is asking why is he doing well? Who is supporting him? And instead there's this all out attack on the people supporting him. And I know people who are supporting Trump, but not everybody is dumb or stupid or whatever other, language they're using to describe these people. But instead it's, you have to understand the US system, and no one understands, it seems, politics or history or the economics anymore. So what's happening is they make it about, well, if you like Trump, you're a bad person. But there's no understanding of really there's a two-party system, right? So it's like, so people are not really stepping back and understanding why. And that's a whole other show we could talk about. And I'm fascinated by that because, as someone that comes from, a place of curiosity, I want to know why. So why are so many people filling these auditoriums? And we see, I'm sure there's people in the comments are maybe dropping the why, but until we can.
It's because it's the rise of populism and nationalism. That's why.
Yeah, and I think people, though, as someone who talks to a lot of people that aren't necessarily overtly political, they're probably not people that are listening to your show, Rick, but I really want to talk to people and see where they're at. And a lot of people feel that they're not being heard. And, I've spent time in the States and listened to people. And, I met one time a woman that was, a big Trump supporter. And, one of the things I've learned is that people are feeling they're not being heard. They feel that their issues aren't being taken seriously. And they feel that he is going to be the person that will champion the more of the working class. And it kind of boggles the mind for some people because they think historically that would have been more on the Democrats. And here in Canada, that was what we thought was the NDP party, for most of my adult life. I always thought the NDP was the party of working class, of, the blue collar, for lack of that's the term. And yet now even people that I've talked to in the NDP have said, yes, that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are really not only, they're taking the lunch, eating the lunch, taking the rest of the meals too. And it's a fascinating study of what's happening in terms of politics in Canada, because there's been a big shift. And, I come from the areas I mentioned of public relations, PR. I work with people around strategy, developing their brand. So I look at all of these topics from that lens, right? So when you look at like a Tucker Carlson, so I saw the intro, I saw the video, him going up on stage. I mean, it's like he's a celebrity. And he's as a public speaker, he uses humor. I've, coached people around public speaking. You use humor, you use stories. And, if you start taking pieces out of that overall speech, it can be taken out of context as well. So back to your original question about, the politicians all standing there. I mean, I don't know, that to me would not be my PR strategy. I would have said, move along, because they're just shining a bigger spotlight. And I think making people that are more even in the middle going, what they were saying makes no sense. And if you go back and listen to the speech, I think people will even scratch their heads even more.
Do you want to weigh in on that there, Leo?
Yeah, I want to just draw it back to where you're talking about the mental health issues and stuff that are going on in not just our country, in the whole wide world, but
sure. Yeah.
You two both worked for Bell Media, right? Once upon a time.
I did.
Yeah,
Gail did.
But I've still worked for mainstream media. I have worked, yes.
Yeah, I was just looking at your profile, Gail. You're the Chief Curiosity Officer. I'm just curious. I was just curious, so I was looking. But the Bell 1-800 process is not working. So when you reach out and touch somebody and call someone, it's just not working. We're falling short on mental health, just like we're falling short on everything in the medical aspect, cancer, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. Leo, I will say this, when it comes to issues around mental health, we are in, that is a topic I have many thoughts on, and also many questions, because it has become such a widespread problem. And until we get to the root of the why, right? Why is it such a bigger problem now? And I think we're kind of feeding into it to a certain degree. And some of that is around, talking about triggers or talking about things that almost get people to feel more worried about it. And social media. I work in that area, but I feel our education system is not helping by not teaching about this, not teaching about algorithms, how algorithms work. That has a great impact on young people, their mental health, because they don't understand. Like, I understand how algorithms work. I understand if I post something, what happens, how people react. I mean, and I know that there's certain posts or certain things that I may say, whether it's in comments here tonight, like people are going to react. And sometimes, as we talked about, I think last night, Rick, sometimes it's not very nice, right? But young people don't understand that. So if they're out there posting things and someone says something, or they get down a rabbit hole, that is a problem, and it causes more mental health issues. And educators don't understand social media. So how can they teach algorithm? They don't even want to do, they still often say, just phone into the school. I mean, when my son was in school, I couldn't even email. That was like, oh no, you can't email the teacher directly because they might get too many emails. I'm like, makes no sense at all. I just thought, and that's going back probably 10 years, right? When email would have been and I can't even imagine trying to say texting or using WhatsApp or any other.
I think we're also in the aftermath of big pharma. Okay, people taking Ritalin, Talwin, whatever, all the pharmaceuticals out there for their psychological, because it was easy for doctors just to, hey, here you go, right? Prescribe you something, Prozac, the list goes on and on, right? That's playing a big part on mental health today.
Yeah.
Okay. I've never had to go to pharmaceuticals. I went the other way to natural self-healing stuff, right? Like cannabis and magic mushrooms and stuff like that. But big pharma is playing a huge part in what's going on today with mental illness. Like Rick says, it's like the MK Ultra experiment. Something's going on. When you got guys in London, Ontario running down a family on the sidewalk, okay, and same thing in Toronto, guy running on the sidewalk killing people, we got problems. Now, from my understanding, they were both on psychological pharmaceuticals.
I just want to say this too, folks, we are a family here, right? And I know that, sometimes people get lonely out there. And I know that there's been a lot of stress and pressure over the last 4 years in particular. And if anybody out there is feeling down, if you're feeling like you need to act out in some way, if any of this is resonating with you tonight and you need just somebody to talk to, I'm easy to find. So
me too. And I work 12-hour shifts. And if you look at my profile, okay, I'm online somewhere all the time, from the hours of 2 in the afternoon to at least 4 or 5 in the morning every day, because I'm at work and I got a nice job where I could do this, right? Yeah. So if you need to reach out to anybody, reach out to me. If it's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm here. And it's funny, we're on this topic. A friend of mine, Tommy T-Bear from Bell River, lost his son to suicide about 5 years ago, lost a niece a month ago. He died a week ago, and his son just committed suicide yesterday. Right?
Wow.
So he's survived by 2 daughters and a wife now, right? He's lost both his sons. It's just mental illness, right? It runs deeper than a lot of people think.
Yeah. Well, we've seen people with, here even, talk sometimes about doing some crazy things. And I just, again, want to say, no matter how bad you think it is, it's never that bad. It really isn't. And if you feel like it is, we're here. So this is part of what this is about. This is new form journalism, and it's a new medium. It's a community is what it is. And we have become a family. So we're here for each other, and I'm here for you. And I've said that before, and Leo is too, or, just reach out, talk to us if you need somebody to talk to. Just don't do anything crazy like that, because you don't need to. It's not that bad. It really isn't. And
Rick, I want to say there's someone commented, and I do think this is something. It says mental health does not absolve or justify bad behavior. And I think that's another thing that, to examine, looking at, there are cases that, we have to understand that difference. There are some mental health issues, but it's true. We have to be careful. We don't just say, we let that person off the hook because of an action they took. Because, one of the cases I found most interesting, we were having a discussion, my son and some friends one time about, different types of justice. And one of the items of discussion was, remember the person who beheaded the guy on the bus and he's now out. And like, I struggle with that, because I'm someone who leans generally more towards, if someone can be rehabilitated, you want to rehabilitate. But there's certain things, just like we were talking about free speech, there's certain things that there are boundaries and lines, and certain actions. I don't know if that person, what if that person goes off medication? That was such an extreme case. And that's what I think we need to really examine in terms of our justice system, and, who gets out. And this is where I said, I've talked about this on my show, Curious Minds, because I do really want to delve into looking closer at certain issues. So when I look at, okay, he's out, but then we have this mega trial over mischief for Chris Barber and Tamara Litch. There seems to be that we're putting all these resources, because there's only so many resources that we have and costs, right? So when I see that type of energy expended on a mischief charge versus people that are doing horrific crimes out there, yeah, mental health does not absolve certain things. So the person that did that to that, that has stood out in my mind when I remember hearing that case. And I just think it happened to be a guy traveling on a Greyhound bus. And I think there is something that is dismissive about that because it wasn't, it was someone on a traveling by bus. And I don't know, that story still makes my stomach turn. And that when I heard that he's out, That's the type of question I think we need to really get more curious about and figure out how we can make changes in our justice system.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Yeah, we certainly need to be looking at all of those issues. The justice system, needs adjustment. Definitely.
Well, what I found with the justice system, it's now become the insane asylum. Okay, and I've been inside, unfortunately, for my doings as being pro-cannabis activist and getting caught, right, for this and that, and various things with cannabis. And I noticed a lot of people coming in with mental illness, and right away, the jailhouse doctor gets them on Seroquel. I've never heard of Seroquel before in my life until 2005. Okay, and in comes a guy, they get him on Seroquel. He's like this, and drool's coming out of his mouth. He's just a zombie. Okay, now your sentence expires, and you're kicked out to the curb as a zombie, right? So I don't know what the solution is, minus talking to somebody, because you know what, talking to, and I've seen this happen, especially with recovering alcoholics and drug addicts, okay, in their 12-step program, and sharing one-on-one with people. And the program does work if you want it to work, right? So anybody with mental illness, like Gail said, Rick said, reach out and touch someone, right? I'm available, and I'm pretty versed when it comes down to mental illness. I know a lot about what's going on, and I try and solve my mental illness by working 12 hours a day. It's a replacement from one addiction to another, right? Ultimately, it'll kill me, but I feel all right with that, right? With putting the food and butter and the bread on my damn table any way that I can, right? Legitimately. So
yeah,
it's what it is. I have to bail, guys. I do have some work to do. I'd love to stay here all night long, but anybody out there in our group, hit me up on Facebook Live or on Facebook. Message me. You can message Rick the same way too. I don't know about you, Gail. I don't know if you're not on my Facebook, but I have over 10,000 followers. I don't even know who's on my Facebook anymore, right? So
I tend to be on X or Twitter. That's where I'm kind of.
I've never been on X. Never been on X. I don't want to go on X because my reason is I don't like Elon Musk. I think he's a sellout and a scammer. But it seems to be working for him, right? So
we could probably have another discussion about that because I do feel strong. I said 50% of people like him, 50% don't. But why I support Twitter/X is especially when everything came out of the Twitter files, and whether you like him or dislike him, he at least has taken that platform to the point that there's the stories that we're hearing about right now aren't showing up on other platforms, or they would get censored. And that's the only place. Now, yes, there's debate about, there is some lines where people, but generally I'm seeing stories and content there that I see nowhere else. And I think it's pushing some of even other media to cover things because of what's on there. So it is, I get a lot of my news, unless you're, now I'm talking more in a mainstream world, because there is Rumble, there's other places, but
yeah, I look at I think Rick was mentioning, why would he ever call it X? And then you just said it, the files, okay, the Twitter files, well, now it's called the X files. Ciao, guys.
Okay, ciao.
Thanks, Leo. See ya.
Yeah, I always have, I mean, Twitter/X is such an interesting topic for me because I've been on it for so long and used it. So I've curated a lot of the people I follow. Like it's fascinating. Like the content I get and the people that I follow. There's a good range of views. And it, for someone like me that likes to look at the big picture and make sure that there's not always cherry picking of content. That's why I like it, because there is an ability. Now, there are people that cherry pick and post on there, but I know who those people are. So I can scroll by, and I know the people that do the research, like Norm Spector and I don't agree with him on everything, but he does his research, and he's he's reviewing both media, both English and French media, because it's fascinating the difference between coverage of topics between French, English, East, West, like, and he has a really good handle on all media. He's out in the West. I think he's more BC, but he's been, a lifetime, bureaucrat, has worked in government behind the scenes, and pretty fascinating guy.
You also were looking a little deeper into the coverage that has been given or not given to the court decision on the use of the Emergencies Act, and you have some additional thoughts on that?
Yes, well, after last night, I had Tom Azar on my, I got his name right. Jeez, just had him on my show.
Tom Marazzo.
Marazzo, I knew that was right. Marazzo, yeah. I had him on my show. So that's on my Curious Minds YouTube channel right now. I just did a live stream with him today. And so now I'll be pulling some clips out of that. Just such a bright guy, very introspective, has a good handle on, being at the convoy through to, analyzing the case. And what I really like about this case is that it's not about science. It's not about the mandates. It's a legal case from the federal government, from a federally appointed, from a liberal appointment that kind of took everything out of the picture and said, let's look at this from a legal perspective, and came out with that they had violated the charter, which I think is such an interesting story. And we talked a bit more today about, what happens if the government, number one, they said they were going to appeal it like within minutes of getting it, almost like I always find it's like, we'll fight this. Well, did you read it completely? The 130 government pages. So they seem to come out, it seemed to be a political commentary, as opposed to really taking time to reflect, be thoughtful, be curious, and again, I go back to, this is the biggest problem in our society right now: lack of curiosity, lack of taking the time to ask questions, look deeper, and just blurt out whatever comes into your mind, right? You're just going to say, okay, we're going to challenge this. So if they do decide to challenge this and take it up, it may not go well for them too. That's, it's a risk. And then, what happens if the Supreme Court of Canada decides that this judge was right? And I think, though, this case will be examined for the next little while. It's going to take us through the election period. And the other thing is, David Lametti just took down, he was the justice minister who took down his Twitter profile, but nothing gets deleted from the internet, right? So of course people are pulling up things from him, and he just resigned today.
Yeah, do you think that's related to the decision?
Interesting timing. I don't want to, I always say, assume. Sometimes I try to assume positive intent. So maybe it's just a coincidence that today he had already decided to make this announcement. I don't know. It seems a very strange timing for him to announce it today. Get out of Dodge, I think, is maybe what happened. So did
you see the interview that he did, or the excerpt from the CBC radio interview that I think is going to actually be posted later? But he is asked about resigning, and then in that, I believe he was, but the portion I saw, he was asked about, are you confident that you made the right decision on the use of the EA Act? And he doubled down on it even in that interview. Did you notice that? Or
no, I didn't hear that. I did see his resignation letter, which someone said it looks more like a resume than anything. But I will interesting. I mean, I could see him doubling down. Like, you almost have to, right? How can you? What if not? He was not like on the bubble about this. He was like sending the tanks, right? Kind of approach. So I think he personally, I get the impression that he felt very strongly about this. I'm sure there's other people that were like probably wringing their hands about the Emergencies Act, but I don't get the impression that was his. I think he was come down hard on them.
Yeah. And if this decision is upheld, I don't know where that leaves the government, because in a really bad spot, obviously. They had people were beaten in the streets over this, bank accounts frozen, the rights that were violated as a result of the use of the EA.
But
this
you know, when
opens the
I'm
door to lawsuits.
when I'm I do think that's still going to happen, but I do talk to some people who go, I just talked to someone who is a very bright person. I know that usually I think is fairly up on what's happening, and he didn't know about the frozen bank accounts. Like, there's people out there that do not, like, we live and breathe this, right? So we're like, we follow the news, we know what's going on. A lot of people aren't aware of that. So I think that's something that's going to have to, we have to educate people on this. And one of the things Tom and I talked about was that I look at things separate from partisanship, right? So I said, let's remove liberal and put conservative in there. What if the conservatives did this? What if the conservatives get in and decide to do this, bring out the Emergency Act against another group? So people that are gung-ho saying, yes, let's support this, well, the tables could get turned. And it's always amazing, and I see this all the time in free speech discussions, is that people want other people's views suppressed, but not theirs. And, I come from, again, that perspective that I don't have to like what you're saying, but I give you the right to say it. And that's why I think this whole thing with Tucker Carlson or Daniel Smith or whatever, they had this event. And yeah, I mean, heck, I've been on stage with people I don't agree with everything they say. I was just talking to actually my son's girlfriend about this. We were talking about, the idea that, I was sort of reminiscing. There used to be a time when you could sit and have a conversation with someone and they could say something like, oh, they like Trump. And you'd go, oh, okay, I don't agree, but okay, pass the cookies, right? And now it's like, I've seen this where if someone dared to say this, they would, I don't want to have anything to do with you. We can't be friends anymore. And I know people that have said, I would not be friends with someone that supported fill in the blanks.
Well, you heard I would say people have just been pulled to the edges so much, polarized so much, that these 4 members of parliament, these liberals today, I listen to them and you can tell in their minds, Tucker Carlson is a Nazi. That's why it's like we have no place for that in our country. To other people, he's a conservative. It depends on your perspective and how you interpret what he is saying. I get it. I understand why those liberal MPs feel the way they do. It's because of their perspective and the way that it meshes with their ideology. So they view him as basically, I think, a Nazi.
One of the things I'd encourage people to do, and I did this and I've had conversations with people about this. I've listened to quite a few Joe Rogan interviews. Now, there are if I said that to certain people, they'd almost like recoil in horror, except because it's coming from me and they see me as someone that's like, I think that's, I try to be more balanced in things, but I said, go listen to some podcasts, because when I first heard Joe Rogan's name came up, I thought he was kind of a knuckle dragger, right? I did. I just thought, oh, my God. Then I listened to these 2 to 3 hour interviews, and wow, I was so impressed with how he gave people space to speak, gave them room. Now, I don't listen to all the MMA and even some of the comedians he has on. Sometimes I'll listen to some of them and their use, but I've been fascinated by the interviews he's had and talked about issues and yet he's actually not this big rah-rah Trump supporter, but if you ask most people, they would say he is. I think what he said is he actually thinks both Trump and Biden, they both should be he dislikes them kind of to some extent equally. Yeah. So the same thing with Tucker Carlson. I think, there's Tucker Carlson of maybe a few years back. There's Tucker Carlson now, and people are judging him probably based on where he was before. I don't know as much about him, but I was talking to someone else that's more up on that, and they said he has he's had some changes and his views are different than maybe a few years ago.
Yes.
I mean, we all probably to some degree evolve in some ways. I've always said as I've got more curious about things and done my research and looked into things, I've changed, to a certain extent, changed some of my ideas and thoughts on things. Not so much on things around censorship and free speech. That I've been pretty and choice. I'm a big choice. I think people, stay out of people's business when it comes to their health. That should be, you do you, I do me when it comes to health, and how about we just move along?
Yeah, I'm there too.
Yeah.
But I'm all about just
actually
letting people do their own thing as much as possible.
Rogan was a Democrat until Joe Biden. And I don't know, you know what? I think Joe Rogan leans a little more, maybe, I don't know if he's a little more libertarian than I don't. And the other thing is, I think he's talked with this. I think he questions where he's at. I think that's one of the things when I've heard him speak on this, I always like when someone is open to saying, I don't know. That's kind of where I am. I'm going, I don't know really where I land. I used to know where I thought I was pretty clear on my own personal political views. And now I'm like, I scratch my head, which kind of makes it perfect for the work I'm doing, because I ask a lot of questions and I'm open to saying let's look at the individual character as well as the political party. And we talked about this last night too, with Tom, is that, politics there's a lot of theater in politics, right? And the 4 politicians standing tonight, that was theater. What happened with Tucker Carlson? That's theater. Daniel Smith is and there's no perfect political system, I think, or political party. I'm going to say political system. I don't want political party right now in Canada, because I think I'm with you on this. We have to find a way to calm the waters and get people healthy physically, mentally, and I think even spiritually. I mean, I think we need to look at what makes us a healthy person, because that will make us a healthy society. And we've gone off the rails and how do we get back on track is the big question. And, fighting among ourselves, I don't know if that's the way to, that we're going to have a good society. I mean, my son is now 21. I look towards what's the future hold for future grandchildren or the future of the next generations, right? And I still am, I will say, I know I have hope. I have to have hope. Every morning I wake up, I have to have hope that today, could I make one small change? And I will say this, I worked for a boss that used to talk about grains of sand. And he said, we're all a grain of sand. And together we build those sandcastles. And I think that seems overwhelming at times, but it is true. If we're all a grain of sand, how can we, work towards making that better society? And what will it take?
Well, I hope we're a little more than a grain of sand. I'd like to think that I have at least some free will. And
well, we do, but I mean, I think what that means is we are one person that can make change. Just like my show, what you're doing with your show, right? We all are. I think you're not doing this show to hurt society. You're doing this show, I think, to cast a light on topics and have discussions and have different people and different voices on. And that's what I try to do with my show. I want to look at things, and bring a little more curiosity to the world and get people to maybe just stop and ask more questions.
Yeah, that's part of the equation. It's been a strange ride sitting in this chair every night. It is a new medium, and this form of journalism has taken me down some very interesting roads. It's a totally different deal, man, than what it was when we were doing it in the old days.
As I said, I kind of follow along in some comments, and I don't like calling anybody, but it is kind of true. Kim, I got to agree. Sometimes I do feel pathetic, it says us wannabe journalists, because, it does feel that way some days. Some days it does feel like, is this, how can I make change, and how does it come across that, yeah. One of the other people that I follow that I like is Ted Lasso. Be curious, not judgmental. And that's, hey, am I judgmental? Of course I am. But I try to sometimes, when I catch myself judging someone else, I try to go, wait a minute, can I better understand this person, right? And it's the hardest thing ever. And we are living in a very judgmental society.
And I think right now we're living in a very low trust environment. I see people jumping to conclusions all the time, accusations flying, even with this Tucker Carlson thing. I've seen accusations being thrown back at Tucker Carlson. You say that you were kind of following the convoy, so I'll ask you about this guy here. This guy's name is Gord McGill. And this came out of left field, but I became aware of it last night. Gord McGill claims to be a trucker. Tucker Carlson features him in his newest online episode on X, formerly known as Twitter. Okay. And I don't know, I've never heard of this guy before, but he says he was at the convoy for a short time. And then as a result of him being on Tucker Carlson, and here, let me just run, well, there's a larger screenshot, but let me run just a little bit of what he says on Tucker's show, if I can find this. Well, first of all, I'll show you this. I've got, okay, so some people are saying this guy's some sort of a plant on the Tucker Carlson show. They say he's not actually a trucker, that he dressed up like a trucker. They say this guy claims to be Canadian, but lives in the US, claims to have been a trucker in several different countries or something. And it shows here that he's actually a resident of Ithaca, New York. And this is interesting. On this profile on, I think it's LinkedIn, it says he's working for a kulak.
I will say his profile photo and the cover photo, that does look a little bit too perfect. Because believe me, yeah. I work with people I'm like, and he only has 115 connections. I don't know. Oh no, it says 115 connections. And
so let me see if I can get you the clip from his appearance on Tucker here. And they're saying that he's basically dressed up in a costume to be on the Tucker show. This is what people are accusing him of. I thought I had the clip and it's just the stupid still. I'll find it for you here, but I don't know. Like this, they're saying this is some sort of a political psyop thing, and this guy's not for real, and that he's actually a political operative, and they've tied him to some left-wing, very left-wing political organizations in these threads as you scroll down. And I don't know, any thoughts? I honestly don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, I haven't found that. I don't know. I mean, when people are lining up people for interviews, who knows how someone found this person. I don't know. It does sound interesting. Of all the truckers that they could have interviewed, I don't know. Has he ever interviewed Chris Bart? Well, maybe because of the court case, he can't interview him, right?
This is the interesting thing too. A lot of accusations have circulated around BJ Dichter. And I also remember Tucker Carlson interviewing BJ Dichter, who seems to now have dropped. He seems to have dropped off the radar largely. I don't really hear too much about
apparently they
BJ Dichter anymore.
I understand there was a Twitter Spaces the other night with some of the people that I guess on the outside of, I mean, here's what's interesting, again, going back to the whole convoy issue, which was fascinating to me, is that, often politicians, media, and other like to put the convoy people as one group of, they all thought the same, believed the same, and they were marching in the same direction, which was not the case. There was different, it was fairly random as well as to how people showed up there. So, yeah. Anyways, you got a clip here?
Yeah, the little clip. This is where he's introduced.
So it's funny that Canada, second largest country in the world, bigger than the United States, deeper natural resources in the United States, our biggest trading partner. Canada's a big deal to the U.S. in a lot of ways.
We've been good neighbors for the most part.
I would say haven't tried to invade or anything like that.
Although I think we need an invasion north, but
I think we can get that done. But
okay, you know what, Gail? I keep hearing that kind of talk. That actually concerns me just a little bit. I mean, they keep saying it's a joke, or I guess he's masking it as a joke, but he keeps saying it. He's been saying it for a year and a half. I'm hearing it from Lieutenant Steve Rogers on a regular basis. I'm hearing it from Jackson Hinkle, who is a self-proclaimed communist. There's a level of seriousness to this that goes beyond just a joke, because they keep saying it. A joke is a joke, but to keep bringing it up for over a year, there's something else going on. But anyway, let's listen.
The average American knows nothing about what's going on in Canada, and our understanding of Canada is ruled by cliches that developed 40 years ago. We think of it as a passive, ultra nice country where, that no one gets arrested.
I would submit to you that the Canadian media returns that in kind, because they've been operating on cliches about Americans since forever.
I think that's right. And there's a lot going on there, but it's a little bit shocking, I think, to most Americans to see how authoritarian Canada has become. Truly a place where you can't ask a question, you'll be arrested for assault. Are you shocked?
That particular incident with Mr. Menzies, I mean, I want to say it's shocking, but at this point, the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa was crushed in much the same way. RCMP smashing the windows of trucks, beating up peaceful protesters. I'm not really surprised that they did this to Mr. Menzies.
It's horrifying, but again, you wouldn't be surprised since you've been following it for more than 2 years now. So tell us, let's go right to that clip that we played from state media in Canada about the 4 incredibly dangerous people who are still languishing in prison.
Right. Yes.
Tell us who they are.
So colloquially known as the Coots 4, Jerry Morin, Chris Lysak, Chris Carbert, and Tony Olyanek are a group of protesters who were at the Coots Freedom Convoy site.
Where is Coots?
It's on the border with Alberta and Montana, sort of where Interstate 15 ends, and then take the highway north to Calgary and other points. And they were there exercising their rights to object to government policies, and due to very powerful forces, they've been caught up in railroaded really by the government and sort of used as pawns, because after the Freedom Convoy was crushed by Trudeau and the government, there was an inquest into that called the Public Order Emergency Commission, which the Justice Rouleau, in his conclusion about the question of whether or not Justin Trudeau was justified in imposing the Emergencies Act, he was I can't remember the exact word, but he was a little bit reluctant. He was sort of like reluctantly agreed that Trudeau was within his rights. And most of that hinges on this case in Coots, which once you investigate it, isn't much of a case at all. And so these 4 regular working class dudes who are at the protest site have now been imprisoned for almost 2 years. They were denied bail. They're kept in what's called remand, because they haven't been convicted of anything. They haven't faced trial yet, so they don't get the rights afforded convicted prisoners. And so they've been subject to long stints of
solitary confinement
and denial of certain medical care. There's been some drama around that. Tony Olyanek has got problems with his guts. He was denied medication that he needed. Chris Lysak is a big, huge bear of a man. He's 6'5", has size 15 feet. They still haven't given him the proper shoes to wear while he's in jail. He's like walking around in Crocs all the time. He also has problems because he's so big. He needs an extra mattress. They've treated these guys like crap.
And what I'll just say there's no media in the world I have more contempt for than the Canadian media. They literally work for the government. They are state media.
Yeah, they're financed to the hilt. In 2019, the Trudeau regime gave them $595 million to bail them out because they're losing money, in part because a lot of people know they're liars and aren't interested in what they have to sell. And there's been top-ups to that. And I think I was looking it up. There's somewhere north of $700 million in subsidies from Justin Trudeau.
Right. So he owns the media. He uses your tax dollars to pay for flattering coverage of himself.
Right. And that's not even counting the CBC. That's a whole another $1.7 billion.
And to eliminate all coverage of his misdeeds. But I just want to get to something that we played in that clip. They were accused of taking orders from a secretive outside group, and Canadian media wouldn't tell us because it was, quote, redacted, what this group is.
Okay. Well, it is redacted, and that information is under a publication ban, which is why the media is not reporting on it. Tucker is trying to turn that into a conspiracy of some kind, but the reality is that information at this point is not available. So that's why to be fair to the media, I can't report it either because it's redacted, and I don't have it. I don't know.
Yeah. I think the issue, because I had this discussion with a journalist as well, because I said the point I was making, not that we need to have reporting on the actual, why they're not being held on bail, like the actual bail hearing. The question I have is why there aren't more questions being asked about 2 years in remand. That's the question I have. Like on charges that it seems we have, again, people that are doing much more horrific, that have done horrific things, and they haven't. Okay, maybe there's something in these hearings that we don't know, but no one's really saying, hey, this 2 years in remand. And again, I don't know, how horrific must it be then? Maybe there's something that judge apparently opened up something and seen something, but
there's a lot of information we don't have. That's why I hear a lot of people just throwing their full support behind them, and I think they are entitled to a full defense. And if and I'm all for that, and they need to be treated fairly in the system, and if bail is appropriate, then so be it. But
I think the issue is 2 years in remand without bail. That is because people get out on bail and going on to do horrific crimes, killing people, like after they've already been, there's been a lot of evidence that suggests this person probably shouldn't be out on bail. They've made threats. Like there was that case of a woman that was just killed out in front of a school recently I think it was in Alberta, right? So that's the only question I have. It's not that they need to report on the bail, but 2 years. If this was anything else, I think there'd be a lot of attention that if it was anyone else, I guess, or anyone else charged with unrelated to the convoy, right? So that's the question I have is, remember, tables get turned. And that's why I said, if you're cheering on that there are 4 people, 2 years in remand without being out on bail, remember, it could be your issue next time, right? And I think we just need to ask why 2 years. It's apparently historic. I don't think it's ever.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that compares to it.
Yeah. What I will say, I just did a quick little research on Gord McGill, and my guess is he seems to have some credibility, knowledge. He was well spoken. Quick research I did of him, I think he seems legit. He has a column. He's known as he is a commentator on trucking issue and has 25 years experience on the road. His Substack is Autonomous Truckers. He's been on podcasts. I just did a quick search. So
I mean, I see people saying, "Oh no, I know him. He is a trucker." La la la. On the other hand, I'm seeing people with I would say some credibility, in politically and even within the freedom movement, calling this guy out, and so there's a lot of division.
Yeah.
Right. So
this is the thing, whether it's just about any type of protest or people, I mean, even in politics, right? You're going to have within parties, here's the thing. Not everybody's going to agree on 100 in relationships. all of a sudden we think if because a certain political party doesn't do everything we want, they're horrible. Well, I tend to look at maybe from a more, as I've experienced being involved in many, manager, I've been in the union, I've been in management. I've, talked to a lot of people, politicians over the years. It's like, sometimes you have to look at, the lesser of which evil, because, politics is such a messy business. One reason why I said, I wish I had the strength and the thick enough skin to go into politics. I don't. I mean, I know, like, I have to give a lot of credit to people who decide to go into politics, because it can be really vicious. I've watched people, at events, and I get it. You go into politics, you have no personal life, basically, because whenever you're at an event, you're going to have, I've even watched people at municipal level, right? They go to an event and someone comes up and they're going to they're either pissed off at them for something, or they're monopolizing the conversation to curry favor with them, right? So sometimes it must be, I would just think it must be exhausting.
Question. The word treason, it keeps coming to the surface. It's thrown around pretty loosely these days, I think. And a lot of people say, Trudeau has to be charged with treason. Yet at the same time, there have been people who have talked about overthrowing government, or there are people who I just talked to Leo about, their separatism. Quebec, a lot of people want to leave Quebec. There's a Western separatist movement. I think that comes into play politically here, even with Tucker Carlson's visit and the way the federal government views Alberta and politics in Western Canada, because of the strong separatist undercurrents that are present out there. And so when Tucker Carlson takes the stage, and you see even people with smaller political parties provincially who that advocate for separatism in the West, whether, and I won't even name the parties, but, they're tied in here. Where does that line get crossed? When does a political movement become treason? When is it appropriate really to use that word? Because I hear it used a lot. Rarely is it, in my view, used appropriately. And in Canada, I think our government has far greater tolerance for separatist political movements because of our history than other countries do. Case in point, India, with the Khalistanis and the separatist movement there, which actually is having some political impact here in Canada as well, with that assassination just recently that took place on Canadian soil, apparently choreographed by the Indian government, and Trudeau involved with that. But I just throw that back to you in a simplified question now. When does that line get crossed? Are we seeing anything in this country that even resembles treason?
That's a big. I'm going to say this is getting a bit outside my probably knowledge on this, because I like to say when I can draw a line, but I don't think so. What I think the issue is right now is more around, I mean, there's been so many things that have embroiled this current government, and people still seem to be not really up on things. They're not following it enough, or they're so busy in survival mode, right? So, I think, if you look up the simple definition of treason, overthrow, betraying your country, trying to overthrow the sovereign, whatever. I mean, there's all sorts of legalistic terms, but we've seen, I think most people find it difficult to have, the discussions we're having tonight, because most people are really busy with getting their kids to soccer, making sure, going to work each day. They got to go to bed to get up in the morning to go to work. They have to put food on the table. That's what a lot of people are struggling with right now.
Yeah, so absolutely. That's a kitchen table issue, right? But really, when we're talking about this court ruling on the EA, it really comes down to the question I just asked, because that is really at the heart of the matter. If you think that what the government did during the pandemic or is treasonous, or if you think that Trudeau has been selling out the country to the WEF, and you think, and we're hearing this word thrown around too, criminals. If you think the politicians are acting in a criminal way, then if you rise up, then you're doing something patriotic. But if, on the other hand, you accept that they were duly elected, that they are legitimately in power, then anybody that goes to that level to oppose the government would be treasonous or committing an act of insurrection. And therefore that would legitimize the use of the Emergencies Act. So, I mean, it just depends on how one man's freedom fighter is another man's rebel, right? So when it comes to politics, these things are not always clear. They're pretty murky.
Bingo. You know what we're facing right now is extremely murky because we're seeing protests now. And I mean, how rules get applied. I've said this, it goes back to, if you apply, the hammer in one group, will you apply the hammer to another group? And we don't know. And I think what's happening now is people are seeing maybe that there's, a lack of fairness, a lack of, applying the rule of law equally. And that usually is what's probably going to cause the greatest concern, especially when there's a government change. I mean, I keep saying this, like, the tables will get turned. It's been shown throughout time. So, all of this, like, it wasn't that long ago, and people often bring this up, the $16 orange juice, right? Remember when that was seen as this, like, big issue, a $16 orange juice. And now we're seeing so many other things, but there seems to be, people are still accepting this current government. But I say that with the asterisk that there's other things happening, and there's a lot of people that are quiet out there. So we have people here in the comments, we have people on social media, we have you and I talked about this. I think what will be the change is the people that are sitting back, observing, and not as outspoken. And that will probably be where we're going to see what's going to happen in the next election is people that are getting pretty tired of what they're seeing. And, I've talked to a lot of those people that aren't necessarily as, political. And then there's a lot of people have no idea. If they tune in right now, have no idea what we're talking about.
I am well aware of that.
Like what did something happen with the charter? Like, they're just.
Yeah. Very few people I can have a conversation with, like you and I are having. If I just go out into the street or even talk to, relatives of mine, they'll look at me like I've got three heads. What the hell are you talking about? So then they just instantly go to, oh, he's just a right-wing nut bar. or a left-wing nut bar, however they choose to assess me. But I'm nuts anyway.
And and again, that's where people don't know where to put me based on my history and where I've come from. Like they're, and again, where my show is a little different than yours, like my show is really looking at, I've talked about this today too, is really trying to talk to people in more of that middle ground, because where we're going to see the greatest change is probably people in that middle ground that want to see less extremes and more balance. And that's, I think when I saw that court case come out, that's part of that balance of getting things a bit, righting the ship a bit, because we had, in terms of the convoy and talking to Tom about this too, he said, and I wasn't aware to the extent that the police were involved right from when they were coming across Canada. The police were involved right up into showing where to put the trucks in Ottawa. We don't hear that in much of the coverage. Do you remember hearing that as a part of a big story that, the police, I mean, it was mentioned, but I don't think it was ever that a lot of people understand that. They thought these people just descended in there and just, I mean, the police directed them into the more residential.
Heck, they gave them an escort for for much of the distance through Ontario, for sure. The OPP escorted the convoy straight into Ottawa. but I don't think they expected it to turn into what it turned into either, right? So,
but they had other options of, and I think Norm Spector's talked about this too. I mean, in politics, you do the back channels too. There was opportunities to try to find some resolution, but again, when you don't have any ability to be introspective and to step back and question where things were going, and I think that was the problem. We had a government that was very dug in on this, and that was my concern when I first heard the commentary and how they were describing people. I thought, oh, this is probably that's not good. That's not good to be going against. I mean, I've always found in leadership, and I've been in these positions, when you're elected to a certain role, you are to represent everyone, not just the people who voted for you.
Yes.
And we've lost sight of that. That seems to be now like seen as a crazy idea. And I think that, yeah.
Well, I think we have to get to a point where we move on from this convoy thing, but it just keeps coming back because the pendulum is swinging back the other way, right?
Yeah.
As we've seen with this court ruling, but yeah.
I don't know if I think the convoy will be for a long time still something that, and I think this case is something that will get more people talking about the why, right? We talked about that last night, because until we start asking why did that happen? Why are people especially in Alberta flocking? I mean, they filled that auditorium. Like it's, and people, I know when Jordan Peterson, remember the big controversy in Ottawa and whether he was going to get canceled. And it was, again, and what happened was when people tried to cancel him, they had lineups, more people wanted to go see him. So it actually was like free publicity for him, because the more they wanted to shut him down, they attracted more people. The ticket sales went up. So, sometimes I just think maybe best just to move along. But no one seems to listen to my PR strategy when it comes to the government. I think, sometimes,
the best thing for the Liberals to have done would be to ignore it, I think.
Yeah.
But no, they had to come out and
force like 4 people to come out, and then we have the Prime Minister's been pretty quiet on some things, right? He's been busy at a hockey game, though.
Yes, I saw that too. And then he was at the caucus meeting today speaking, and I see that I don't know if you noticed this. At the end of his speeches now, he builds to a crescendo, and then he talks about Canada being the best country in the world, at which point I just throw up in my mouth a little bit, because this coming from a prime minister who is Canada's first post-national PM and called Canada the world's first post-nation state, which to me is in itself kind of a treasonous statement, if you want to look at it that way. You can't believe that Canada is the greatest country in the world if you think that the history is a myth, if you think that everything about it is genocidal, if you think that everything about it is horrific and nothing exceptional, and there's nothing to be proud of in terms of the past, and you, to the point where you actually want to essentially dissolve your national sovereignty and hand it over to a one world government. So how in the hell does that make Canada the greatest country in the world? Unless the greatest country in the world is one that no longer exists because you've dissolved national sovereignty entirely. It just makes no sense. But hey, vote for him because it makes you feel good, I guess.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we've just heard, on the world stage, right? I think that's the other thing we have to look at, the optics of how Canada's viewed. There was just a story. Now, I don't know all the details. I saw something quickly about the UK it has to do with the dairy industry. There was just a news story that,
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Look it up.
Well, I'm just looking up. Let's see. And it's, and that's the thing. Sometimes I see these things and then.
The UK dairy industry, and this is what, new government regulations or something?
Oh, yeah. It was CBC News said British negotiators walked away from trade talks with Canada Thursday, a dramatic development that taps the brakes on a bilateral trade deal between the two Commonwealth nations that has been years in the making. UK walks away from trade talks. And now Rupa commented, colossal policy failure by the Trudeau government. It was the UK, not Canada, that paused the trade negotiations. The British were not happy with what Canada was offering or not offering, which in this case was access to our dairy market. Canadian marketing boards protect domestic agriculture and distort the economy in a big way, which means we pay for overpriced dairy and eggs.
Yes, we certainly do. The Milk Marketing Board, and it's all a managed industry. It's not a free market, which is why we end up dumping milk down the drain, literally every day to inflate prices. They restrict supply to jack up prices, impose caps on producers, can only produce so much. There's a statement from the UK government. We have always said we only negotiate trade deals that deliver for the British people, and we reserve the right to pause negotiations with any country if progress is not being made. We remain open to restarting talks with Canada in the future to build a stronger trading relationship that benefits businesses and consumers on both sides of the Atlantic. And of course, Canada can't enter into these kinds of negotiations in a way that benefits consumers in a good faith way, especially as it relates to Canadians, because if you have a managed industry where you're forcing your domestic consumers to pay above market value for a commodity like milk, a food, then it would be immoral to sell it to consumers in another country at pricing below what you force your own people to pay for it. And so they're probably trying, and I haven't been engaged in the coverage of this at all, but I'm sure that they must be trying to impose that same kind of ideology and economic policy on the UK government, where it's a centrally planned industry and trying to inflate the prices for the consumers in the UK too. And they're probably getting pushback. Am I on the money there? Or?
Well, again, outside my area of expertise, other than I just saw that, whenever I see CBC saying that headline, the UK is, and it's like, whoa, what's going on, right? And again, I always look at optics and how, this ties back to our economy, how we're viewed. There's so many things that, at a certain point in any leadership, in the world of any leader, if things are starting to tank, sometimes it's best to move on and let someone else step in and, try to remedy things. And that's, and I think, we've seen that with the Conservatives with Aaron O'Toole. I mean, I guess you could say he was pushed out. But I mean, at a certain point, you have to decide, you hope that people will decide what's best for the party, what's best for, solving problems. And I just see that right now things seem to be, not going in that direction when it comes to the politics here in Canada and how we're viewed on the world stage, right? To me, that's a big concern because that does impact trade. Since I do work also in manufacturing, how we are building these relationships, and whatever our current prime minister may think of a future president, like sometimes maybe Beth, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. I think sometimes you got to follow that rule, because what happens when that person wins? You have to look long term. And to me, whatever you may think personally of those things when it comes to politics, you may have to work. And as Canada, we're going to have to work with the US. That's a big trading partner. It impacts so much of how we're doing things and our competitiveness. And I don't know, I'd be very concerned about starting to badmouth anyone at this point. I mean, we should be building bridges, not in attack mode.
Yeah, well, if Justin is still prime minister when Donald Trump becomes president, and it looks like that will be the case, they will already have started off on the wrong foot because Justin kind of stabbed Trump in the back before. So there's no love lost there. That's not good for Canada either.
No, we have, so on that note, I am going to sign off, but I just hope from this conversation, I hope if nothing else, I just like to leave it with, be curious, ask more questions, look around corners, because there's, before jumping to conclusions, and we all do that. It's human nature that we also want to be right on whatever we think about something. And it's much harder sometimes to reflect on things. So thank you, Rick. As we said before, you and I go way back to our days in the media. I think someone asked, something about something expertise, or do I have expertise? No, you know what expertise I have? And I have expertise in asking questions and trying to look at how to, I will say this, I've said this for a long time. I do have that bit of that Pollyanna view. I have that belief that there still is hope and that we can build a better world. And I know people can go, oh, what does she know? But I mean, I have to believe that in order to have hope for what's going to happen. Because if not, when I wake up each day, right, I that's for my mental health too. I want to believe that, there's
Me too. And, I did ask this of Leo, and I'm going to ask you this, and hopefully I don't keep you too much longer. But, I said, would you support the country being broken up? Would you support portions of Canada joining the United States in light of, these separatist sentiments that we're seeing in the country? And Tucker Carlson saying he's coming here to liberate the country. And, Quebec sometimes wants to leave, and we have the separatist movement out west. And people have said that Ontario should probably just be part of Michigan. Where do you stand on that? Do you think that we should do that? Do you have faith in the Canadian system? Do you think that it's still worth it to vote? Or do you think that people who say your vote doesn't count, why even bother? Just do not comply.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I will say, yes, I do. As much as it's, I do believe I will vote. I believe there is still hope out there for Canada. I do not want to join the US. And here's one reason. I just went to go talk to American Express about something about a trip, and you cannot book a trip to Cuba. Like in the US, they cannot. And whatever you may think of Cuba, I don't think people should have freedom to travel. And I've always scratched my head about that, of why if you're an American, you can't go to Cuba. Number one. Number two is, not everything in the States is all wonderful. I mean, look at what's happening in California. Look at, whether there's other states that are rife with problems. So not everything is wonderful. If you look at even New York, we have the border issues in Texas. There's some messiness there. So I think we need to get our own house in order. I don't think jumping into the US is the answer. I think we need to look at how we're going to go back to what makes Canada strong and work on that.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that.
Someone wrote it was a shithole. But if someone wants to go to a shithole, they should still be able to go.
Yeah. Have you been to Cuba before?
I have, yes. And I have a lot. I have a lot of thought. That's a whole other, I've actually spent longer time there. And so, yeah, I have.
Did you like it?
What was difficult is that because of the embargo, right? Again, it's like the people there are amazing. I met some amazing people. Mm-hmm. I understand it. You have to, if you compare Cuba to some other countries, right? And it's a very complicated political topic as well. But here's what I look at. I have a concern about the US saying to people that they can't go there. I don't think that's the land of the free. If you're going to say we're the land of the free, you should I think they should allow people, and then people can have different, I'm sure, opinions on that. It's not as enjoyable because everybody says the food, you don't get the same food access. And But there are some positives about Cuba. You know, there are fewer health issues for people because that's all covered. So you don't see the same degree of health issues that you might find in, say, Haiti or some other comparable countries, right? But, you know, Cuba is neither the most wonderful or the worst ever either. I mean, there are some things in there. And I think that whenever we look at any country and any political system, there's pros and cons. But I'm going to still put my money on Canada.
I didn't really like Cuba that much, and I don't really want to go back. I didn't like all the anti-American propaganda that I was bombarded with walking through the airport. And when I don't know how much time you spent watching television in your room or wherever you were staying, but where I was, there were channels that were like 24/7 anti-American documentaries, and it was just like constant.
Right.
I noticed a lot of Canadian channels, a few US, but it was a lot of Canadian stuff. I guess maybe because they were catering to Canadians, but it was like their cable, right? So the Cubans are getting this. I didn't like the fact that, I didn't like seeing people just living at this level, and then I'd be on the street and they'd be driving around in old cars, or you could tell that they just didn't have a lot. And then I'd see somebody drive by in a Bentley, right? And so this is a communist government that is telling people that there's going to be equality, and it's actually just the opposite. The ruling class, they have opulence, and the average person is just right here. And to me, that is, I don't like to use the word slavery, but it's a cap. It's like you're never going to get higher than that level. That's it. That's where you are. And you couldn't get ketchup. There was sometimes a shortage of soap. There were people on the beach at the resort where I was at, where they would come over and, you know, they're people are bringing them soap, right? But it's not like they were completely impoverished. It's just that there were some things they couldn't get.
And that's what I said, though, for the US to ban people from going there also doesn't seem like, okay, again, that goes down to, you know, two wrongs don't make a right? So like, I just think we can't say, oh, the US is this land of the free because they're restricting travel. And even during the pandemic, I very much against restricting people's right of movement to travel. I think that's a very slippery slope. It's a big concern. And, you know, Cuba also has the right to, you know, that's their system, right? It's
and that's it, right? It's not up to the United States or Canada or any liberal democracy or any Western country to tell any other sovereign nation how they should run their affairs either. It's like, I think we kind of should try to stay out of the business of other countries, unless they're going to put missiles there to nuke us.
And, you know, that is because I spent a longer time in Cuba and I, you know, talked to a lot of people and I understand. I mean, one of the biggest issues is, you know, someone who's a doctor is making less money than the person working in the tourist industry. And, but I will say this, I did see less people when it comes to like on the streets, people, you know, even then from like places like Mexico and that were begging and had various health issues. And, you know, I always said, if you're going to get sick somewhere or have a heart attack, you want to have it in Cuba. They have the best medical system. So there is some, it's not that, and again, it's not that everything is all bad or all good, right? And that's how I look at every system but what is, I think, again, balance, because I think Cuba is out of balance. I think to a certain extent, the US is a bit out of balance. Canada has got out of balance, but Canada used to be more and I used to have these debates with my friends in the States. I'd say, oh, land of the free. Oh, can you go to Cuba? And they'd say no. And I go, oh, interesting, right? Because now I was coming from a place, I was being a little bit cocky there because I thought in Canada we could. And then all of a sudden, pandemic hit, and I was like, never mind. So
do you watch Peter Schiff, The Economist?
No.
Okay. So he's probably not even popping up in your feed because you don't even know who he is. So he's an economist. I follow him. He's sort of a libertarian free market guy, so I like him. But he said something interesting the other day. He said that wall, he's against Trump's wall. He's against the border wall because in his view, it might not be they may not be building it to keep the immigrants out. They might be building it to keep us in. Think about it.
We have to ask a lot more questions, and things aren't always as they appear. And we've kind of gotten to the place that people just do believe everything they're reading or hearing. And, you know, Rick, you and I've talked about this. We're probably the people that go, wait a minute, got another question about that. And why is that happening? And
yeah,
the biggest question that never gets answered is why. We often miss that why. Why is that happening? Just ask why. So,
yeah. Gail, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
So grateful to you joining us on the show again tonight. You helped me out and made this a lot more interesting.
Thank you. And I want to thank all the commenters, because you know what? I always learn from not all of them, but I do appreciate it. Like, I've been reading some of the comments, and you know, it's interesting because this is sort of, you know, and I know I think there's some joking around, and there's also a little bit of playfulness. I hope it's playfulness. And then there is some, I'd say some.
Yeah, there's some of that too.
there's some less niceness, but you know what? I always say, try to be kind. You don't have to be nice to try to be kind, right? Because being nice, like, no sense trying to bullshit. If you don't like something I'm saying, I'm fine with, like, listen, I'm one voice. I just happen to have, you know, a bit of experience in my role as media. And you know, here we are discussing things, but by no way am I any expert in any of these areas, other than I look to people that I interview. So anybody want to come over and check out my show, Curious Minds, that's where I do interview people that have a lot more expertise in areas than I do. And I like to give them some space to talk. And yeah. Okay. Bye, everyone. Someone said bye, Gail. Thank you. And thank you to for the kind comments.
You have fans, man. You have fans.
Well, I think it's an interesting discussion, you know, and we need more of this sometimes. I think we need to have a little more, and we need to have a little more fun times too. You know, we need to allow for some humor. I mean, that's why I sometimes watch. I don't know if you watch.
Careful, I might just accommodate you.
Have you seen the one Armageddon with what's his name? The comedian. He was from Afterlife as well.
Armageddon.
Somebody. What's his name? He's a comedian. He did the big Golden Globes commentary. What's his name? Afterlife, Armageddon.
Ricky Gervais.
Ricky Gervais. Yes. Now that is, I was able to watch that with sort of a mix of people with different views, and we all laughed at that. So if you get a chance, Rick, if you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to watch that. It's he really gives a bit of a poke at a lot of different things, and I think he's brilliant. And if you haven't watched Afterlife, that Afterlife show is also a brilliant show. Just caution for people that it is, you know, it's a bit of a sensitive talk, but I never thought, I mean, he talks about, you know, both death and humor, right? And finds humor in that. So which is, I'm more of that camp. I think we need to have more levity. So, okay. Good night, everybody.
All right. See
you. Good night, Alice.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Mary Ellen. And I'm so old, most of the people don't even know what the heck I'm talking about.
I think I was kind of quoting a honeymooner, so I was going with you.
Yeah.
Okay. Take care.
Jackie Gleason. Take care.
Yeah.
See you.
Good night, everybody.
Okay, folks, I'm going to check on a couple of things and I'll be right back. Don't go away. There's still more. There's more right after this.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
Justin Trudeau did meet with his caucus today. He was trying to rally the troops, gave kind of a campaign-style speech to his members of parliament and his team. Let's check in and listen to just a clip, because this is where Justin Trudeau goes on the attack and takes a swipe at Pierre Poilievre. Here he is.
My very first call this year was with Volodymyr Zelensky, who wanted to know that Canada still stood with him, that Canadians still stood with him. And I told him, yes, we do. The Canadian government and most of the parties in the House will continue to stand with him. But Pierre Poilievre and his Conservatives chose to vote against support for Ukraine, calling it a faraway foreign land to appease Putin apologists like Tucker Carlson and those who enable him. But while he does that, we have people like Yvonne Baker and Mark Gerritsen who are showing our Liberal government won't back down when it comes to standing up to bullies and fighting for democracy at home and around the world.
So I'm sorry, I thought that was the clip where he was calling out Pierre Poilievre, but he does go on to do that. And right there, you can see the extreme political divide. It's interesting, you know, and I think this is accurate. You have the neoliberal wokesters who view someone like Tucker Carlson as a Nazi. And yet at the same time, you have their leader, Justin Trudeau, standing at a podium saying he's a Putin apologist. And that's because why? We're seeing a convergence politically that I've referred to over and over and over again. A meeting of the political left, the Marxists, communists, or people from that vein, and the fascists over here. It's complicated, but I'm calling it communofascism. It's globalism is really kind of what it is. And yet it's strange because it seems it can be applied to even China, that's an adversary of the West, when in reality, you know, it's identity politics, neoliberalism, it's woke lefties like Trudeau that are graduates of the Klaus Schwab School of Economics. It's a strange thing. When it comes to politics, it's never black and white. Reality is never black and white. Truth is even sometimes not entirely black and white. In fact, it rarely is. It's all shades of gray. It gets complicated because political ideology is rarely ever practiced in a pure form. People always have a variety of different views. That's why, especially when it comes to populism, it's hard to hold things together, because the populist movement, like we're seeing in the States through MAGA and the Trump phenomenon, and in Canada, the rise of populism through conservatism and now into populism through parties like the PPC and even the Conservative Party of Canada, which is benefiting from that by kind of scooping up that support and pulling it back into the fold without actually entirely reuniting the right. With all of that kind of happening, it's difficult to keep that together because you do get, again, a mix of people with different political ideas and ideologies coming together to form a populist movement. There's usually a catalyst, something that ignites a passion and galvanizes in a cohesive way people from different political movements, people with different political stripes under one umbrella for at least a short time. But keeping them there is very difficult, especially when you get a convergence of the left and the right, if you want to look at it that way, or at least people with conflicting political goals. And I always say that fascism and even communism, socialism, those are sort of, they're not sort of, they are on the left of the political spectrum because it's more and more and more governmental control. But to try and keep that together long term, it's very, very difficult because it only takes once that galvanizing issue is resolved or wanes in terms of public attention, and public attention spans are short, then to hold those political parties together or those political movements together, you need something else to, again, provide cohesion. That's why the freedom movement is having trouble remaining together, because it was the pandemic that really allowed people who were there at the core of all of that to then make use of that time period, that political unrest, to use that as a catapult to something much bigger. And people with different political views actually rebranded themselves, I would say, in the early days of the lockdowns and the pandemic in order to make use of that to further their political agendas and to try to get to their political objectives. And it's still happening now. But in order to continue that, you're seeing an effort by even the PPC or even MAGA to latch on to other issues and continue things forward, continue that forward momentum. But historically, populist movements tend to self-destruct after a number of years because the people who are together also have very different views on a variety of other issues. And when those things surface, it tends to tear things apart from within. So it's very difficult. When you have Marxists, they hang out with Marxists. They tend to believe a lot of the same things, and it becomes almost, well, it's a club, it's community. It's also, I would say, political religion. They really subscribe to a very strict political ideology. Freedom-oriented things, populist movements where you're bringing people with different ideas together, save for maybe one or two important issues, that's more difficult to carry into the long term. Trump has been an aberration when it comes to that, though. And there are a variety of reasons for that, in my view, and we can maybe get into that in a larger way another night. I have actually addressed it in shows past from many, many months ago. The rise of the freedom movement, what really precipitated the convoy, the original convoy, what the populist movement is really all about. Anyway, I'm kind of blabbering on about all of these political ideas at this point. Time is marching on. And with that being said, I think we're probably going to wrap up tonight. We didn't get to the phones this evening. I think we will have time to get to the phones tomorrow night. If you are so inclined, would really appreciate the support here on the channel. And you can support us by donating at MaverickDonations.com. That's the Give, Send, Go account, as you know, if you're a regular viewer. Great Christian-based organization. I love what they're doing over there. They've been very helpful. Or you can also donate, as most people do, through the freedomreporters.com URL, which takes you to a PayPal page. And if you donate $60 or more, I do have these gorgeous shirts, and I will send you one. We still have some of these Dickies shirts. Very durable, comfortable. I love the things. The Maverick News logo embroidered on the front right here. And I'll send you one for $60 donation. I'll send you one. Just make sure you tell me what size you need when you put a message in with the donation through the donation portal, and I will get the information. Any color you want, as long as it's black. And you can also contact me if you need to by going to the website at mavericknews.ca for any reason, either to tell me what size of shirt you need, or again, if anybody out there is feeling like, things are so bad that you think you have to go out and do something crazy, don't do anything crazy. Do not. It's not that bad. And whatever is bothering you, you can always contact me. Phone number is easy to find. You can always email me, and if you need to call me, you can phone me too. I'm not that difficult to find. Unfortunately, Peaceman did not join us here on the program tonight. Sent him the link. It's unfortunate. 3 nights in a row, we've been trying to get him on. I did send him the wrong link last night, so I apologize for that, but something obviously has happened. I can only tell you that it was another victory for freedom. His charges were dropped. He was supposed to go through about a 4 or 5 day trial in Ottawa, and we know from information from his lawyer that those charges no longer in effect. So good news for Peaceman, good news for the freedom movement. Another win in the same week that the federal court ruled against Justin Trudeau, saying that the way he used that Emergency Act was in fact unconstitutional. Good news all the way around. We'll see how it plays out through the appeal process. And who knows, maybe we'll get Peaceman on sometime over the weekend. Tune in tomorrow night for another great broadcast. We've got lots of great guests lined up in the coming week. And there's going to be, as usual, lots of news to talk about. So keep fighting for freedom out there, folks. Thank you so much for joining me here on the program. As always, a privilege. And I will catch all of you tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.